Okay. John, is the stream started?
Not yet. Okay, we are now streaming. I'm going to set up the recording. And I'm going to open up the meeting. We're all set, Joe.
Okay. So to start us off, Wade, can you conduct roll call, please?
I think I'm turning it over to Katie. Katie, are you okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Badger,
Here.
Mr. Bleefeld,
I'm here.
Mr. Frank,
Here.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
Here.
Mrs. Heyman, Mrs. Kariakis,
You have to hear me.
Mr. Stoloff, Mr. Walsh, Mrs. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Antonio,
Here.
Alex Gindea,
Here.
Morgan Wilson.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent, and 2 board reps are with us tonight.
Great, thanks. And I know that Ronnie should hopefully be joining us shortly. She's just having some technical difficulties. Okay, so I apologize for the delay, everyone, in getting started with the meeting, but glad that everyone's here. It's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. And John, can you please display the flag for us? All right, and please unmute so I'm not the only one saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
All right, thanks everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 20th, 2020 public meeting of the Wissahickon School District's Board of Directors. We don't typically have a voting meeting in July, but as we know, this year has been anything but typical. And tonight we are going to take a formal vote on our school reopening plans, as well as a few other items. And I'd like to note that the board met in executive session earlier this evening to discuss personnel matters. Item 2 on the agenda is the list of meetings over the past month, and we'll get updates on a few of these later in the agenda. Item 3 is the list of upcoming meetings in August. And with that, we'll get to the meat of the session. It's presentations, which Jim will kick off.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We have tonight 2 presentations, both on the same topic, which of course is reopening of schools. There are 2 plans per se, and I want to make sure everyone understands the distinction before I flash them up on the screen. The first is a plan that the Pennsylvania state is requiring. It's called the Health and Safety Plan, and they provided all districts with a template. And as you'll see here in a second, there are different categories of things that districts need to think about and plan for as fall approaches. And all of us are to have that plan be board approved and then send it on to the state of Pennsylvania. Interesting to note that the state doesn't do anything with that plan and doesn't review it or approve it or whatever, but they just have it. So we'll get to that in a second. And then the other piece, which is, so the health and safety has things like what happens if it's a quarantine situation, how about cleaning, what goes on the bus, that kind of thing, operational type things, and safety. The second plan is our teaching and learning plan, which is how we propose to reopen schools in terms of what the teaching and learning will actually look like at each of the grade level. And we have a document for that. Now, the first document, the state's health and safety plan, has not been shared out publicly. Bits and pieces of it, the meat of it have been, but the document itself is way too long for that. So for example, on Friday in my weekly update, I sent out a chart to all stakeholders that talked about what happens for quarantine matters. All of that information that came directly from the Montgomery County Department of Health has been incorporated into our PDE plan. The second document that we're going to talk about, the fall reopening teaching and learning plan, was also, that document actually was circulated to all stakeholders on Friday. And we will also use that as a visual aid tonight. There is no PowerPoint or presentation tonight. We're just going to use those two documents as visual aids and as maybe ways to invite questions from board members. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now for the health and safety plan. Boom. Okay, how's that look? Is that shared? Okay. So this, see if I can get over here. This plan, as I said, is a template that all districts are filling out. And I do not intend to go through all 29 pages of this tonight, but I do want to hit the categories of things. There will be virtually nothing new in this that we haven't already talked about. So be it our approach to face coverings, for example, that's included in here. Our approach to busing, et cetera. So we'll go over each of the categories just so that you have a sense of what this plan covers. And of course, anyone can ask questions if at any time.
Hey, Jim.
It's only showing a piece of this. Can
Yeah,
you
we're not getting
expand it?
Let's see.
Yeah, your screen is kind of like truncated.
How's that? Is that better?
That's better.
That's better.
Okay. Okay. So there's a table of contents. Not going to bother you with that. The health and safety plan is personalized to our district. This words here are all the state's words, so I'm not going to go over that stuff. Here's the first page that they want to know about. What type of reopening are districts considering? And you pick one of these four here. And as we know, we're proposing a blended reopening, which balances in-person learning with some remote learning for students. And we'll get to that later. That's about all that this document talks about with the teaching and learning. We're going to talk about that next in a very, very detailed way. But this starts August 31st, which we know is our first day of school. It asks districts to identify their pandemic coordinator team. So I have listed all the people involved here. I have this title, which has really been awesome the last few weeks. And then various different leaders throughout the district are taking subcommittees and involving others. Sometimes they're involving teachers, sometimes there's nurses, sometimes there's guidance counselors, etc. So you can see Dr. Klosky obviously is an obvious one for special ed. Kathy's got human resources and so forth, on down. It's important here, we were appreciative of TJ and Lisa's involvement as local union association co-presidents. They were involved every step of the way, as were several other teachers. So then one of the things about this document that districts are objecting to, and I kind of took a little passive aggressive approach to this, was this document envisioned districts having a different approach if you're in green or if you're in yellow. And almost none of the districts that I've communicated with have a different approach to those two things. It's about the same. So I didn't distinguish. I didn't take the time to type out more words about yellow versus green. It's the same. Now, if we're under red phase, that's a whole different matter. And, you know, our red would be 100% virtual for everybody. But anyway, we're not going to change whether somebody decides we're yellow or somebody decides we're green. We're doing the same action steps. So the first category of things they ask about is cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation. And we've spoken a lot about those over the last couple meetings and presentations. You give a little summary here. There's some training, custodians and bus drivers on new enhanced expectations. So I'll give you an example of the chart. This is the first page. So it has here in this column, requirements, how you would clean like areas used by students, drinking fountains, hallways, buses. And here are all of our action steps under yellow phase. As I mentioned, I just refuse to put more words down for green phase. So it's the same. So that approach is the same throughout this whole document. The yellow column is the same as the green column. It really, the distinction for our purposes is almost nothing. it asks for us to identify lead people. So in this case, when it comes to cleaning and sanitizing, that's Jerry Moore and his team of buildings and grounds custodians. It asks if we need, or we should think about what materials, resources. In this case, we need some hand sanitizer. We've been accumulating large quantities of hospital grade disinfectant, and we need some hand washing soap. And then it asks if professional development is required. And the answer is yes in this case, because we needed to train our custodians, which we've been doing over the summer, what these new expanded cleaning and sanitizing protocols will be. This one is a good one that was asked at the last meeting about ventilation in the schools, and a couple of questions have been raised about that. And I did mention that we are going to increase the percentage of outside air that the HVAC systems use and circulate. So that's good, except for that, remember, that's going to have even more temperature challenges than we normally have in these school buildings, which I know we could have a whole meeting on that, which we're not going to tonight. There's some other things. The next, we don't have any other cleaning, there's plenty in that one, but the next category is social distancing and other safety protocols. Now we're getting at how far apart are desks, what are we doing about masks or face coverings rather, etc. So, for example, in some, it's often the case if we have rows in a classroom, they'll face the same direction. As I mentioned, that's taking a step backwards from what we know good teaching and learning is. Good teaching and learning in 2020, normal circumstances, would be where students interact more often, look at each other, small group, collaborative type exercises. Much less likely in this example because everybody's facing the same way. That's a common protocol. 6 foot social distancing is to be achieved the maximum extent possible at all times. It's quite possible at our elementary schools, we can't get 6 feet between desks. If the kids are a little smaller, maybe we get 4.5 feet between shoulders instead of 4, I don't know. But in any event, we get 6 feet as often as we can. And then there's some other things, lunch, and lots of questions are being asked about lunch specifics, and we've directed questions in the last few days to the building principals because the answer to lunch at Stony Creek is significantly different than the answer to lunch at middle school, for example. Principals have had some very good interactions with parents, and both parties are appreciative of the opportunity to talk it out rather than try to guess what someone's asking about or really concerned about. We are going to try as best we can to provide opportunities for kids to wash hands or at least sanitize before and after eating. And again, that's building specific as to how that happens. Put some good, we need signage. So for example, we got to get some signs and those are just common sense, how to hand wash signs, but also how to stop the spread of germs generally. Visitors, non-essential or non-essential visitor volunteers will be expected to follow all these protocols. Sporting events, recess, phys ed, to the extent that sporting equipment is shared, that will be sanitized more frequently. Recess activities will be distanced outside. We love the idea of outside time as much as possible. But of course, we have to limit the physical contact and we have to be attentive to social distancing. We're trying not to share materials as much as possible. We will have computer devices that will hopefully be, to the great extent possible, used by the same student each day. That, for example, requires more computer devices, which the board has already acted on and we already have on order. This gets at what happens in hallways. We're going to try to minimize high traffic areas. We're joking about the knuckle at the high school. That's going to have to be somehow, that's probably the biggest challenge. But if we have less movement, or maybe not everyone moving at the same time, or maybe people moving in one direction, those sorts of things, we can minimize that. This part talks about transportation. So of course we have Wade in there and that falls under his jurisdiction. We have our transportation director, Karen, who is not new to us, but relatively new to this position. And she last spring did an amazing job of helping us figure out all of those arrangements. And then, of course, the building principals. We've spoken about masks on the bus at all times. We've spoken about the increasing ventilation by opening windows when possible. We're going to educate students to sit forward, not sideways. If age required, there'll be protocols. A lot of these things are probably sounding like common sense. And why do we have to bother with this? And the answer is because PDE tells us we have to bother with this. And it's probably not bad anyway, just if nothing else, to remind us of all the things we have to do. Let's see, childcare. People who use our building, maybe before or after hours, shall, to the great extent possible, follow the same standards as we have. They may have their own rules, they may have their own approach to things, and that Wade drew that straw as well to coordinate with these facility use organizations. But that's important. And this one, very sadly, field trips will be severely cut back. If no other reason, it's hard to get everyone there. Extracurricular activities shall be limited if not postponed. Large group activities are frowned upon now, unfortunately. This is that category, monitoring student and staff health, where in that chart I shared with everybody on Friday's update, the one that came from Montgomery County Department of Health, and the one that has, hey, if you test positive, you are out for this many days, and if you had were in contact with somebody who tested positive, then this will happen. All of these things, we are going to follow Montgomery County Department of Health's protocols, so I didn't repeat them here necessarily. I stated that. So when it comes time to, say, monitoring students and staff, we are not going to check the temperatures of everyone every day. We're asking parents and guardians to do that, and staff members before they come to school. We'll have a checklist. We'll educate what that looks like. We're going to educate and remind the importance of staying home. Again, these are things we do every year, but maybe there's ramped up quite a bit. The building principal and the building nurses have been tremendous in this plan. Kathy Dearborn and Cindy Bass have been invaluable in helping us develop these. Let's see. This is all the things that come right from the county plan. Important point here is that we are identifying isolation rooms within each school building, either near the nurse's suite or nearby, so that the people who have a fever and who therefore might be symptomatic, or at least might have it, are kept apart from everybody else. This here, returning isolated or quarantined students, none of these are ideas. We just entirely follow Montgomery County Department of Health. We have this chart. This is that chart I was referring to that our nurses drew up based entirely on their guidelines, but we use it for our purposes. This is a frequent question. How am I going to be notified as a parent if somebody tests positive? Or how are we going to be notified of closures? I don't think we're going to have to worry about notifying people of school closures. I'm pretty sure that word will get out like wildfire, probably before I even know it. But anyway, be that as it may, we'll have lots. The contact tracing is actually done by the Montco Department of Health, and they actually take the lead in identifying those who should quarantine. They'll, of course, tell us. And we'll share out information much like we do now with other contagious diseases in the sense that we'll send a letter home. We've had a positive test. We will not use anybody's name, and we'll confirm that all the right protocols are being followed in terms of staying out until feel better. And there's a last category, just other considerations for students and staff, some other different things. So here's where our face covering approach is. We're following Governor Wolf's orders, of course. And then once or if those are lifted, we will continue to have the expectation that everyone will wear masks or face coverings. That's that part there. Students' needs spelled out in IEPs shall be met as usual by the usual collaboration. We've had a lot of questions on special education, and so many of those are student specific. We've asked parents to contact the case manager or somebody in student services, and they've able to help talk that through. And let's see, health and safety plan. So here is the professional development that we need, the trainings in various different areas. Many of them have already gone in place, such as Jerry's work with the custodial staff. We'll have to train students about hand washing expectations. Students and parents will need some information about busing. Outside agencies, so forth. The nursing staff will have a big part in this because there's going to be a lot of communications going home as to what our protocols are and best practices. And then here are the communications, whether it be coordinating with state and county. I'm doing that on a basically daily basis. We've communicated our district plans for reopening, 2 board meetings, plus tonight is 3. I have a weekly update I send out. Individual school updates are coming from building principals. They've already started, and that's a really good source for specific questions. How we're going to allow for choice of program, Gary and his team developed that document, which is actually going to look at next. And then district staff member plans and options. Kathy drew that straw. It's quite the short one because it's extremely complicated as to what staff members' options are. It's obviously very specialized, personalized based on their own circumstances. But as you might imagine, there are many, many phone calls on that one. And so that's it. This part here just summarizes the various sections up top. I just referred everyone to a page. I refuse to type all that stuff again. And then that's it. Then this is voting on tonight, later in the meeting, and then we'll record the vote, and Joe gets to sign it, and we send it off to PDE. And that is as fast as I can go through 29 pages without being insulting or even more boring than that already was. So before we move on to the next document, and we can always, I'll have this up as well, I'll keep it up, but what questions might we have?
First off, Jim, is this plan, is this posted on the district website?
It will be once we approve it.
Okay. And one thing in looking at the plan, it makes a distinction between green and yellow, but there's no actual discussion, at least not required by the plan template, to say what happens if the state goes into the red phase and the governor shuts down schools for in-person instruction. So what is our contingency plan for that scenario where we go into the red phase and schools have to be closed?
Okay.
Explain
I think that's a
what
good
that is.
observation. This here is, I noticed that as well. This is kind of in the introductory preamble of the thing. So red phase schools are closed. We conduct our remote learning in a sense similar to spring, but with many improvements, modifications. If all schools are closed, then all instruction will be remote. All teachers will be having their students, and they'll be interacting with their students. The students will follow their same classes. If it's a secondary level, they'll go from class to class, and there'll be much more interacting, synchronous learning opportunities in that environment. It says here about school meal programs. We'll probably try to do that like we did, and of course, no large gatherings.
So Jim, in the current hybrid model that you've discussed with us in the past, you were contemplating a structure of breaking up the students into 2 cohorts, a cohort A, cohort B. Cohort A going to school Monday, cohort B Tuesday, and then alternating days going forward. And in the event that we are in red and schools have to close, how does that change in the 100% virtual version? Is it still in that same structure, alternating content?
No, in that case, there's no need to hybrid because we don't need to create more social distance in the school. And so a class of 24, say, will just meet with their teacher every day like they used to. There's no point in having just 12 each day. That wouldn't make sense.
But then that would be a significant shift in the structure of how the curriculum is going to be taught going into this school year with the hybrid model, right? In the hybrid model, we talked.
I mean, in the sense, the teachers right now will have to give thought to how they craft their lessons. TJ had a really good point the other day. They don't. I was afraid of how many lessons, and that's not accurate at all. And I should have remembered because I would have driven myself crazy if I, as a teacher, had 180 lessons. You have 180 days, and you have 100 lessons or something, some of which expand over 2 days or more. And so they're going to have to convert those to a situation where some of the work is done live and some is done at home on the alternate days. That's if we're in person with a hybrid working. If we get shut down, if it goes to red and we all go 100% virtual, then then the teachers convert back to the way they just always have done it. With all their students together, all 24 students will be in the class every day, and it'll be a live synchronous experience.
Okay.
Question? Question?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's some daycare centers may be using our facilities. How are we going to be sure that they use the proper sanitation levels that we use before our kids get into school?
Wait, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think Dr. Crisfield actually laid it out. What I will be doing is communicating what our plan is to them, and they will have to submit a document to me saying that they will do A, B, and C before I would approve of them using our facility.
Not that I'm distrustful, but what level of supervision are we going to give them on this?
So the YMCA has been a long-standing partner, and I think a trusted partner. So I don't think we're going to have any real problem with that. But clearly, parents are very good eyes and ears, and I'm sure that I will be told almost immediately if there's any problem.
Thank you.
Jim, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you go through the document, it appears that sort of the general health issues are taken care of by whether it's the county or state guidelines, but more specific action items are left up to us, such as cleaning, sanitizing, things like that. And there's some things in the document that concern me. For instance, when it talks about cleaning services, it says it should be done on a quote unquote frequent basis. I don't know what that means. And what I'd like to know is when it comes to that, are either the students, teachers, or administrators going to be doing any type of surface cleaning on a quote unquote frequent basis? And what will that be? Such as when kids go from class to class, who, if anybody, is going to be cleaning the desks and chairs that they sit in? Or when you talk about going through the hallways and alleviating that potential mess, the document states that we're going to do it when feasible. Again, I don't know what when feasible means. Are we going to be putting down signs on the hallway floors or lines to delineate the direction of travel to actually ensure that that is done? Those are I think, the biggest concerns when we get to the specifics of it. If we're going to do this right, frequent basis should be, I think, a little bit more definitive than frequent, and when feasible to me should be a little more than when feasible. If you could comment on that.
I don't disagree with any of that. I don't know that this document itself necessarily needs that. I think we need to nail that down and share that out so everybody knows what we mean. I shied away from putting a whole lot of details in this document because this document felt like a bigger picture planning thing to me. But the question about, and maybe we can actually have, it'll look different for different levels. So for example, elementary doesn't have the classroom cleaned uses because the kids are in there, same kids are in there. So that one will be cleaned frequently, but just, you can't say like every period because there is no such thing really. Secondary level, if we're trying to keep students in one place as often as possible, but of course, that's not too, it's not easy at all. So yes, there will be different people using that room, and middle school might look different than high school, but I think we can get out details as to how that cleaning will take place. We might have to confer with Jerry. I don't know, Boyd, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we've had discussions on it. I've had discussions with the principals, but again, so I think what Marshall, Mr. Bleefeld, you're asking, gets at realistic versus unrealistic expectations. And so if we have, I don't know, 95 classrooms at the high school, and we had an expectation that we were going to clean desks between each period, I would need 95 people to do it, essentially, because there would be no way to go from one room to the next in that time frame. So what we are planning to do is have rotating custodians go through the building and hit high touch areas. And we are going to have disinfectant on the teacher's desk with some ability for students, if they want to be able to clean whatever space it is that they're going to be using. But I don't think we have any ability, nor do I think pretty much anybody would have the ability to clean every single desk between every single period anytime there is a change.
I have a comment and a question, I guess. So if we're talking about this right now, I know, is there a way that we can have each principal do like a little short video clip or something from each school saying what the plan is for that school as far as, cleaning and safety, just so that each parent for each school would be able to just click on that video from the principal and say, this is the plan for Bluebell Elementary, and this is the plan for the middle school. That way the parents will see exactly what we are going to have in place.
Yep.
And for the middle school,
we can do that.
For the middle school, I would think, and I don't know, you guys have probably already talked about this, but since they're in pods and they basically change teacher of the pod, instead of doing that, have the teacher change rooms. Is that feasible at all? Probably not, because the stuff in their rooms, right?
If not always feasible, it could be, we can work that approach into things as much as possible. So we can't say like, yeah, that's ever going to happen every time, but
right.
I like the thinking because it minimizes how many people are moving. So,
right.
And I know this doesn't get the details, but we're, to the greatest extent possible, which I know sounds like it's not really a welcome phrase, but it does describe our approach to that. The principals have sent specific things out. We've talked about the most effective ways. I'm not sure of video necessarily, but school specific information from the principal to parents with the offer of, if you have a question about any of this, please call me.
Well, I do know that some school districts are putting out videos. It just like, it could be a 3-minute video of what the safety precautions are going to be at each school, like just a look at what a classroom is going to look like, that type of thing. It doesn't have to be a long video. It could be a very short video of, this is what we're planning here. This is what lunch is going to look like. And this is where we're going to do it. But I think that would stop a lot of questions coming to the principals too. They wouldn't have as many emails that they would be answering if there's just a little clip, little short video of what each school's safety precautions are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can
add to that, this is Zeffie. Sorry, my audio visual is not working so great, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I think it would be very important for families to understand what these processes, protocols, and procedures are in advance of July 31st, because I'm sure many are weighing this information in the decisions that they're trying to make for their families and for their children. So I urge that we have that information in advance of that.
Definitely. Agreed.
And I don't know if we want to talk about, we're having our other presentation right after this health and safety plan. Do we want to talk more in depth about, other things like outside time and how that's going to look? Will that be in the next presentation, or should we talk about it here?
We can talk about it here. I mean, it's kind of both. I mean, it's related to teaching and learning, and so.
So my question is that, we're being instructed to go outside as often as possible.
Right.
I know at some of the middle or some of the elementary schools, there's a lot of trees and a lot of shade and a lot of coverage, so that if teachers want to take their kids outside, it's hot, they can get out of the sun into the shade and maybe do like a little class stuff there. Have we thought about how we're going to do that for the middle school? I don't know, like there's trees way far away at the middle school. I don't know that there's any kind of shade there. And the high school, I think we might have a little bit better for the shade, but have we thought about what we're going to do when these kids are going outside in 95 degrees and there's no shade? Like, are we looking at getting like some kind of canopy set up, or what are we looking at there?
Mrs. Walsh, we haven't specifically talked about shade versus, non-shade or hot versus not hot. But I am in conversation with the principals about, and we've had some orders already go out about getting extra tables for the outside so that there is sitting or seating available. Where they are putting it, where they plan to put it, I haven't gotten into that level of detail yet.
Yeah, because I know, like I said, I know especially at the middle school, I'm trying to think of where the tree line is, and it's really far, like after the softball field and down past the football field. I don't know that there's anything close to the middle school that would offer any kind of shade.
Yeah, where they actually eat, I think actually is fairly shaded currently, and she may be planning to do additional there. There are trees right, there. But again, we can get that written up.
Yeah, but if we're talking about classrooms going out, not just to going out and eating, but classroom, the teachers taking their kids out for classroom, we might have to look at some kind of something that we erect some kind of canopies or something that offers some kind of shade.
Okay.
I have a question.
You're right.
So when our elementary teachers take their classes out, are we going to have all these kids sitting just together on the blacktop, playing on the playground? Why are we taking them outside? They can't be next to each other. Like, this doesn't sound right.
Well, you're right. They can't be next to each other. They can be 6 feet apart. So we'll need, and we're not allowed to have a big group anyway. A class of 20, 25 kids will just have to be dispersed. And the reason we're taking them out is because outside is good. Fresh air, more circulation is good in terms of keeping safe. But good point. I mean, we can't pack them into a tight spot.
Well, that's my point. We're going to have second graders following directions to stay 6 feet apart, stay off the jungle gym. Sounds like a disaster.
Well, I would think that for outside, for the elementary schools, you would have them come out into the shaded areas and have them sitting for some of the classes. Instead of sitting in their classroom, they could be sitting outside. I don't imagine that they would be. just on the jungle gyms and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you could bring your class out and teach it outside instead of teaching it inside. And you just have to sit the kids 6 feet apart.
I would agree with that. I think these are excellent examples of school-specific questions, because the opportunity to be outside, it might look different, and certainly different by grade too. So conceptually, we want more outside. And Ronnie, you're bringing up a good point about age of the kids, and it might be a little tricky if they're not. And Tracy, Shade, those are all good school-specific things that principals are prepared to share with their parents, their families, and they will. And took a good note for that. I'm not sure if I would necessarily conclude anything tonight, other than to say that yes, we're going to look outside as much as possible, as safe as possible. Amy, I think you had a question.
Yeah, just on that same point, I was just wondering at Stony Creek how we were planning to do outdoor time, since there's going to be construction going on, and I don't even know if we have trees left over there. Like, how are we planning to do it with construction ongoing? Is it going to be very noisy?
It could at times be, and so Ms. Sasson, who's getting points every day for her creativity, we'll just have to figure that out. I don't have the answer specifically to Stony right now, though. But you got good point. Construction will have to be considered.
Jim, earlier I asked about what would happen if we went into red phase and had to close schools for in-person instruction, and you talked about the contingency plan and the switch to the 100% distance learning. It sounds like it'll be Wissahickon teachers teaching at least mostly synchronously with their students, and I presume using like Microsoft Teams or some like virtual type technology like that. Barring situations where we actually go into a red phase and are forced to shut down, do we as a local school district have the discretion to go into that 100% distance version if we feel that conditions warrant?
I'm discretion. Jeff, could you elaborate a little on that one, please? I'm not sure about that nuance.
The question, let me just be sure I got the question. Do we have discretion to do what?
So our the current hybrid plan that's proposed here has a contingency of switching to 100% virtual if we go into the red phase, right? So there's a game plan for handling that. In advance or without going into red phase, could we as a local school district decide, if the board decided, superintendent decided based on local conditions, we wanted to go for safety reasons or health and safety reasons to 100% virtual? Do we have the discretion to do that?
We do, but as with all the decisions, as we previously reviewed, there will be pros and cons associated with that potential move, and it would effectively be a modification of our already approved health and safety plan. But as we know, none of these events that we're currently dealing with is at all scripted or rehearsed.
Okay. Jeff, can you talk briefly about what are the downsides of us on a discretionary basis switching to like the 100% distance version in advance of going to the red phase?
Well, I think if you were to interview any educator about the choice between a virtual option and a direct student interaction option, particularly with students grade 5 and below, special needs students and the like, an in-person option is always better from both an educational and delivery perspective. I don't think there's any substitute for that. I think the state, when it was looking for these plans, was trying to encourage districts to the extent feasible and to the extent safety permits to try to deliver a direct educational program for that reason. The other issue is, if we were to go to a virtual environment, it would mean that the district would likely have to furlough a significant number of its support staff, which would not be necessary in a virtual model.
A hybrid model, right? Oh, no, you're
yeah,
saying the staff's not needed if we went to virtual.
correct. Correct. If you go to a completely remote model, you would not need your full complement of support staff. And that is, of course, a negative. You would also not need bus drivers and other positions in the school district. Unfortunately, whatever option the district elects to deliver its educational program, it will carry with it both pros and often a lot of cons. The choices that were left to deal with are not wonderful choices and will not satisfy, admittedly, all of the multiple constituencies that exist in our district. You know, a hybrid model, for example, parents who work and have young children, it's going to be problematic in terms of scheduling. And nothing short of coming back to school with the way it was prior to the pandemic will address all of the needs that we have, but we're unfortunately in a very different world than we were at prior to March 13th or March 14th of this year. So I don't envy the district, I don't envy the administration, and I don't envy, for that matter, the community in terms of dealing with these multiple options, because depending upon the ages of your children, depending upon your own particular work needs, your own ability to address some of these issues, whatever option you choose is going to carry with it some substantive negatives.
Okay. Other comments? Jim, you also had that fall reopening options document. I think you wanted to
Yes.
review with us.
Yes, let's get that up here. Okay. Do we see that okay now?
Yep.
Okay. So this was developed by Gary and his team after quite a bit of meetings and thought. And this was shared out with all stakeholders on Friday. And it's broken down by 3 different levels, K to 5. One of the things that struck me was a couple parents asked, okay, so we're gonna choose one of these? And that was a question that really, that's like a threshold question. The answer is yes, but it never really occurred to me that wasn't obvious. So I'm glad they asked that question. And now we're gonna highlight the fact that every parent will choose either option A or option B. And that choice runs for a full semester. And then at the beginning of the second semester, we'll have another option if they want to switch back or switch between.
So Jim, let me just clarify for this, what we're looking at right now. Option A is in person with Wissahickon teachers, and option B, virtual. This says it's going to be Wissahickon teachers also?
That's correct. At K to 5 level, this page, this first page is just elementary, just K to 5.
Yep.
And the in-person is like it is every day, you know, with obviously all these safety guidelines in place. The fully virtual option in K to 5 level is with Wissahickon teachers. Okay. And we spoke about that a little bit last time. We'll have a 3rd grade class. If there's 25 3rd graders who want to be out virtual, we'll have 2 3rd grade classes. If there's 50 grade, whatever, it'd be just like kind of like another school, and we'll create sections. Now you'll be with students most likely from all 4 schools, which is actually kind of a nice thing. And the teacher will be Wissahickon teacher. It'll be one of our teachers who either prefers to be virtual or is asked nicely to be virtual for a semester, and off they go. And the rest of the, it'll be synchronous. We listen very, very carefully to what the feedback from spring, and Gary has spelled all this out, that we've got synchronous teaching and the virtual now. In spring we didn't. Now let's remember what synchronous means. It means live and it means interactive. Okay, and I want to come back to that point when we start talking about the hybrid at the secondary level. Synchronous is not showing some teacher who's live instructing how to add, complex fractions or something. It's small groups. It's what you do in a classroom. It's good teaching and learning, and you interact. Hey, somebody raise their hand, and I know people are raising their hand now, and I'm sorry I can't get to them. But in school, you do, and then you have little breakout groups of 4 or 5 who talk about something, and then you can ask questions and so forth. It's synchronously might be better phrase interactive, I think, versus asynchronously. Now, in some cases, some of these things, like sometimes it might be hard to do one of these encore classes synchronously. So sometimes it might have to be a recorded thing where it's not interactive. But most of the classes and core subjects, if you will, are synchronous, live, interactive with teachers, with second teachers. And what I think I'll do is I'll go through all 3 levels, and then I'm gonna have Gary explain a few things that his team was kind of focused on, and then we'll take questions if that's okay. The second page of this thing is what about middle school? Middle school is a little complicated because we have a hybrid option for middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, where students will come in every other day, either A day or B day. And when they're home, when they're not in school, they're doing asynchronous lessons at home that the teacher has arranged. The teacher might have them read up on the author that they're reading. They might have them write things that they just finished reading in class, that sort of thing. That's the hybrid, and that hybrid is done to get half as many kids in the building at once. And for older students, their need is they can be home by themselves, unlike elementary students. And we have come to learn that while not everybody likes it, some older students are generally better with asynchronous than younger students on average. That's a generalization, but on average. There are hybrid, the option, and here again, parents will choose either the hybrid option or the fully virtual option. Is where it gets a little complicated, because in grade 6, okay, grade 6 option B is just like the K-5 one. It's with a WSD teacher, and the teacher has their class all day, and they teach all the subjects, and that's because their certification allows them to teach all the subjects in grade 6. Starting in grade 7, certifications do not allow that. You have to have subject specific in grade 7. That's why it's a little complicated. Districts that have elementary schools K-6 don't have this little problem that we do, but in any event, our families of students in grade 6, their option B is basically the same thing we just talked about with K-5. It changes as soon as you start grade 7. In grade 7, you can choose the hybrid option, which you come in every other day, or you can choose the Wissahickon Virtual Academy, which exists now. The thing we've used for a couple years to have in some, not nearly this scale. It's a semester-based program. It's Pennsylvania standards. It's not Wissahickon teachers. It's a company called MVP that uses certificated teachers, but it's asynchronous also. It's not interacting with the teacher. It's, and there's a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's asynchronous. And so the instruction is asynchronous.
Hey, Jim, just to clarify that this is a program that is run by the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. So they are, it's not like some private company or charter operator or something like that. It's the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, which provides a lot of educational services, primarily like special ed or early childhood for districts all around Montgomery County.
Right. And same, this, by the way, this option here, this grade 7 and 8 option is going to be the same exact option as we'll see grades 9 and 12. There are drawbacks and there are positives. The positive is the MVP Wissahickon Virtual Academy can provide a vast array of course offerings that we couldn't possibly do if we were to do our own teachers. We wouldn't have nearly enough teachers, because if you're going to teach 7th grade science, you have to have a science certification, and that might not necessarily allow you to teach biology in 9th grade. So it would have to be a ridiculous number of teachers doing things virtually, while in the Virtual Academy, MVP, they have all these teachers. And they can offer a great bit of flexibility in terms of the schedule, in terms of the course offerings, and it's just kind of taking advantage of economies of scale there. Now, important point to emphasize here is that in the Virtual Academy, the students are still Wissahickon students. They do not disenroll. They are our students. They have support by our teachers available, our counselors available, our English language services are available. So while it's not synchronous instruction with Wissahickon teachers, you do very much, and if to the extent we're allowed to have extracurricular activities and sports, you're absolutely part of that. And you have these supports available that are our local supports. It's just your core instructional program is done by MVP. So I know that that is not popular in some circles. We can't figure out how to offer up a fully virtual. Now that gets to Joe's question earlier. What if we go to phase red again? If we go to phase red, this is all out the window. Phase red is like we had in the spring, where your teachers have you in their class every day with the lessons we learned from the spring. Synchronous learning, more interaction, more rigor, more accountability, all those things. So if we go to code red, we don't need a hybrid, have a hybrid. We don't need a Wissahickon Virtual Academy. You can choose that if you want it, but you'll just meet with Mrs. Smith, the biology teacher, like you normally would. It's just if we try to open the schools in some fashion face-to-face, which in our case is recommending the hybrid approach for grades 6 to 7 and 8. If we do that and you and your family don't want to go to school, you might have somebody at home who's particularly compromised, you might just be worried about it, we don't need a reason, then this is your option. You can choose this, or you can choose the Virtual Academy. So I'll move on to high school, and then I'm going to ask Gary to chime in.
Jim, as it stands now, the school hours will remain the same regardless of which option you're choosing, or whether it's middle school, high school, or K through 5?
The answer to that is sort of yes. If you're starting in grade 7 with the virtual option, so grade 7 option B here, that's a flexible day schedule. You are on the MVP, it's asynchronous. So if you prefer to sleep in and take your classes at night, that's an option. So to some extent, I think that answer your question is not in not all cases, but if you choose the hybrid, yeah, every day that you come in every other day, then it's just like a normal school day, regular hours. Does that answer your question, Paul?
It does, thank you.
I know. Okay, so the high school, we have option A. Again, it's a choice. High school families will choose between the hybrid approach, which is the same as the hybrid at the middle school. You go every other day. The high school schedule has some peculiarities to it. Like there would be some day X, 8 period. Those are details. There'll be Wissahickon teachers plan to deliver instruction in the classroom. And then on the off day, when you and your B day students are not in class, not at school, you'll have asynchronous activities. At asynchronous activities, sometimes the phrase flipped classroom is used in this profession, and it doesn't exactly apply here, but it kind of does, in the sense that a flipped classroom philosophy is where educators give the students things to do at night to do the learning, and then they come in the next day and they get their questions answered and they get extended thing. That's not exactly what we're talking about here, but it's a concept of recognizing that older students are able to do things on their own. That's not to say that everybody likes it that way, but they're able, and we're incorporating that philosophy into this model. And then at the high school level, if a family prefers virtual, it's the Wissahickon Virtual Academy. It's like the middle school grade 7 and 8. So at this point, Gary, I know you and I spoke about some of the things that you were going to highlight. Do you want to kind of expand on some of those?
Sure. So I would like to just stay on this graphic right now, Jim, take it down yet, but on that days attending and the one you were just focused on, alternate day at home, asynchronous lessons. So what I'd like to do is try to explain the sort of the structure of the school year and how this works in terms of advancing learning. If we consider the fact that students attend school 180 days of the school year, every single one of those days' lessons moves instruction forward. So anything we're doing in this process, anything we're doing every day has to be moving learning forward. We can't consider any day sort of like holding pattern or waiting or slowing things down. We're not in a position to do that. So every lesson that we design needs to be one that advances learning, whether that's in the classroom or whether it's at home doing an asynchronous lesson. We, in the spring, of course, had the challenge associated with the pandemic arrival of putting into place at-home learning, virtual remote teaching and learning. And as the community well knows, as does the community of educators, that was a tough plan. That was tough for us. We also needed to learn things along the way. We needed to figure out how to do certain things that were not part of our typical instructional day and experience. And it was a slow rollout, first with students doing 2 weeks of at-home lesson plans. The teachers thoughtfully designed, but they were not any plans that required any interaction at all. The students basically had the plan and were to go ahead and follow through on the activities. We advanced from that to asynchronous learning, where the teachers were learning different strategies and tools to introduce concepts, to reinforce concepts, and to keep kids abreast of learning in that mode. And then ultimately, we tried to move to synchronous learning, which for some students, they had more experiences than others, and clearly not enough that would satisfy any of us now in looking at a plan that must advance learning and must move kids a full year of learning in all of the content areas. So in the hybrid option, we talked about at the last board meeting, we talked about the idea of live streaming that was introduced as a way to increase interaction among students, classmates, teacher, and to keep kids more connected to the instructional process. And that was kind of a tool, a vehicle for accomplishing just that. So I want to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about how the live streaming could be a valuable tool for us, and where it has value and where it might actually not help the teaching and learning process or advance it in the way we need it to do. So again, at last Monday night's board meeting, the idea of live streaming was introduced in relation to the hybrid option for students in grades 7 to 12. An idea that sought to increase the interactions among the students, keep them more connected to the instructional process, and likely also to increase accountability and a sense of being connected and daily attendance at the school. So since Monday night, our tech team, our curriculum instruction team, and our teaching and learning task force of 20 teachers and administrators did explore the concept of live streaming in the classroom. We looked at it from two perspectives, that of technology as well as teaching and learning. And let me share with you what kinds of things we learned. John McGowan and his team replicated a scenario at the high school in one of the classrooms with at-home learners, in-person learners, and the teacher. These were all staff members, by the way. They were not students, but they were all playing the roles of those 3 different groups. And it was done in one of our high school classrooms. Now, clearly, classes are not in session. The high school is extremely quiet, and this was in one of those classrooms, but it was giving us an opportunity to kind of replicate what the experience would be like. So using the teacher laptop as the source, as the camera, and also the microphone, we learned we can definitely use Microsoft Teams, our platform for video conferencing, as a tool to have students from home join class virtually. The students can view the teacher, or they can view whatever the camera is focused on at that moment. They can listen, they can speak during the lesson, and both those in the class can hear what is being said, and they can speak in the class, and the students at home can also hear that. We recognize that the teacher has students sitting in front of his or him, I'm sorry. The students are sitting in front of the teacher with the balance of the class on the laptop screen. Depending upon the lesson and the focus of the class, students may need to focus on various places in the room. Teachers do try to maximize the instructional capacity of a classroom by using certain areas where there might be a lab experience going on. There might be another area where there's a reading that's being accomplished with a small group working. Depending upon the focus, this might require the teacher to move the laptop as the focus of instruction will change. We also recognize that the teacher must use the laptop to shift from Teams to Infinite Campus to Schoology to various links, articles, and videos that are shared with students during the lesson itself. Clearly, we recognize this tool has value, and its value will be more evident in certain classes than others, depending upon the design of the lesson and design what the teacher is attempting to do. So again, as I mentioned earlier, over the course of the year, the teacher has 180 lessons, basically over 180 days to advance the curriculum for that particular course. This includes the lesson that happens in the classroom, as well as the lesson planned by the teacher for students at home. We refer to that as the asynchronous lesson. For any given in-person lesson, there might be a short whole group shared mini lesson at the beginning, but teacher-centered instruction is really not the order of the day. And after a 10-minute introduction, get things started, typically students go off to work in groups. They work collaboratively. They may be working on an independent activity as well, reading an article, doing something on their own, and then bringing their ideas back to a group discussion. And so in any class session, the focus on the teacher being the center of instruction, the smartboard being the primary area to look, is not the case. Instruction is facilitated in lots of different ways with lots of different activities. These whole class intros, the mini lessons that I talked about, lead into small group work. They could lead into a hands-on learning task. They could be paired work with 2 students working together, or they could be some kind of a problem-solving experience. So while these experiences will vary across the curriculum, they'll change from content to content. These are some experiences that students could be experiencing in a given day. A biology lab where students are learning more about animal adaptation and engage in an outdoor simulation designed to mimic natural selection. A physical education class learning the serving techniques associated with the sport of volleyball. An English class where students may be involved in the reenacting of a scene from a play. An art class where students are engaged in sculpting or pottery. Now, in some of those cases, there are learning materials that students need for those experiences. There are tools, there might be machinery, there might be technology, there might be supplies, things that kids may not necessarily have at home. So for the students who are at home, their experience in such lessons would be far more passive than what we would typically desire in a more active learning experience. Now, the next day, that lesson, whatever that was that day, with a live streaming approach, that lesson is done. For that one lesson is now complete. And the next day, both the at-home learners and the learners who are in the classroom, now they move on to the next lesson, whatever the lesson happens to be. So whatever took place in the classroom that day was experienced actively by some, it was experienced more passively by others. And again, this doesn't mean every class is exactly like this, but this just points out that not every class could benefit in the same way for every single lesson, which is the point I'm trying to make.
Gary, just here's kind of the bottom line. Let me just clarify. What you're saying is that there is no technological barrier for using webcams in the classroom and doing live streaming. That is, we know that that can be done. The
Correct.
question is, the key question is, should it be done? And from an educational standpoint, summarize why, even though we can do it, the technology's there, we have the ability, explain and summarize why we should not do it and why you do not recommend it.
I believe that for this particular tool to be used, it should be used as the teacher sees it would be valuable for a given lesson. That it should not be that every single class on a given day for students at home, that they should be required to tune in to the start of the day and sit through every single class of the day because of having the camera availability in the classroom. So, because I think the experience that students will get who are at home will not be as a quality experience as that of the kids who are actually experiencing those types of lessons in the classroom.
Why not?
I say that because if we're doing a biology lab and kids are actually manipulating and using the tools and investigating and doing the actual work of the lab, that can't be replicated in a virtual setting for the students who are watching it take place.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
All right. So I know I've expressed this before, and I think if we have the technology, I think doing class every other day and having something asynchronous every other day won't be as good of an education, in my opinion. I think that we should be doing the synchronous every day, with the exception of the teacher should have the ability to say, all right, so if you're doing a lab, okay, so student group A will come in Monday and they will do their lab. And on Monday, student group B has the option of watching the lab or doing something else that the teacher might assign to them that has to do with this lesson plan. And then the next day when group B is in, they would be doing the lab, and group A would have the option of watching the lab again, because maybe there's some questions that they have from the previous day. Or they would be doing the other thing that the teacher had assigned that might be some video or something along those lines. So I don't think that it should be every day. It would have to be synchronous. I think we can leave of what would best fit their plan. But I don't think that we should be saying every other day the students are going to be asynchronous. I think we should shoot for the norm to be synchronous every day, and the exception to be when, the teacher feels it's better for what they're teaching to do it synchronous on certain days. And it doesn't have to be every other day. Maybe it's, different days, but we could leave that up to the teacher on what their plan is, what their teaching plan is, and give them the option to figure out how best to run their classroom. I think by offering the synchronous every day, it keeps the students much more engaged than doing it the other way. And as far as the doing it on the laptops and the teachers having to access different things, different programs like Schoology or whatever they need to get on Infinite Campus, maybe we do the phones as the cameras. And the teacher, this way, the teacher's not sitting at their desk in front of a laptop, because none of the teachers do that. They don't just sit at their desks. They're up, they're walking around, they're doing visuals or, helping students that are in the classroom. So maybe we have the camera set up where they could take the camera around and walk around with the camera, and the kids would see different things. Or even we have it where maybe there's mounts in the corners of the room and the teacher can put the camera there. It's stationary, but it's got a wider view. It sees everything in the room, could see the whiteboard or the smart board or, the students in the classroom, but it gives them access to be able to use their laptops for things of putting things up on the smart board or going on Infinite Campus, but still having the camera in the room. I think there's just another way to do it that I do believe that, we have to do some kind of hybrid. I just think that we can have it where we're not saying it's every other day that you're responsible for going to school, and then the other day you can do work whenever you want during the day. I just don't know I don't think that's going to be the best program for the kids.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting a little bit into the weeds of the academic day, which I think, educators and the professionals probably should be the ones to define it. I mean,
I know, but we have to vote.
But here's
on
the thing.
this.
This is not a technology issue. I mean, we can clearly do this. It's what Gary is saying essentially, and it's up to us to decide where we're convinced of it or not, is he's saying that he does not think it is educationally appropriate or it's instructionally sound. That's kind of the bottom line I'm getting here. Again, this is not whether or not we can do it. We can do all those things that Tracy described, but
I think Gary's also saying that, there are certain times that it's not appropriate. And I agree with that. There are times when it's not appropriate, but I don't think it should be deemed as every other day. I think it should be more of, we can do synchronous every day. If certain teachers can absolutely do synchronous every day. Certain teachers can't. There are labs, there are, art classes or phys ed, where you just can't do it. But there are classes that you can do it every day.
Tracy, I think actually we're in agreement in the idea that the tool has value and it can really help where it's appropriate. And the teacher, giving the teacher that option to know that that's a tool that they can actually connect with students and use for certain lessons is something we should do. I just was concerned that the parent, the community out there in choosing their option might be looking at the hybrid and thinking it's going to be asynchronous every day if you're home. I'm sorry, it's going to be synchronous every day if you're home, and it's going to be in person, obviously, when you're in the class. That's the part that I just didn't think we want to put that forth to the community, that that's the way it would be. I would think that the educator needs to make the decision about when it's appropriate to bring the kids in from home and when it's more appropriate to give them a task that they would typically do in the classroom, but it doesn't make sense to do it in the classroom if they could do that at home and save the stuff that's really important to do in front of in the class for that purpose.
And I agree with you. And I think that the point that I would want to make is that we stress to the teachers to just not assume that it's every other day that needs to be synchronous. Like, that the teacher should and can do every day if it's possible. And also that the parents and the students don't think that every other day I don't have to really show up for school at 7:35, that I can sleep in until 10 because I'll do my asynchronous work whenever I feel like it.
Yeah, I do think that the every other day being in the classroom with the teacher will help in terms of the accountability, unlike the spring when clearly very little of that happened at all. So I do think that will be a help here in terms of building that accountability, because teachers will see the kids every other day in person and can have those conversations when there's issues in terms of lack of work completion or something that needs to be done that's not getting done or not attending even. That could be problematic for sure.
May I add to the discussion?
Sure.
Yeah, Morgan, go ahead.
Well, like from a student perspective, I believe that like synchronous classes would be much better because it helps prioritize like schooling and kind of like enforces you to like do the work like then, as opposed to just like, as Mr. Walsh was saying, just do it whenever you feel like it, because then there's so many different ways you can get the work done without actually learning how to do the material, as opposed to if you're doing a synchronous class, you have to do the work, you're mainly doing the work yourself, and it's harder to kind of like work your way around doing schooling. Like, in a way, it forces you to actually do the work as opposed to asynchronous class.
Following on what Morgan and Tracy said, I think the idea would be to encourage our staff to use synchronous teaching on the off days as much as possible, but they won't be penalized if their lesson plan makes it impossible to be synchronous. Does that strike you?
Well, I mean, I think the way the hybrid model was described to us is incompatible with on your home day just watching the live stream, because if on the A day they're teaching a lesson to the A cohort, the next day they're teaching that exact same lesson to the B cohort. So then if you're at home, you're going to be watching the same lesson you saw yesterday. So to go
right, that's what I'm saying shouldn't be happening.
So
But
Gary,
it
you
would
want
be synchronistic if it can be, so that certain classes might have 5 days of the next plan, the next plan, the next plan, the next plan. Because I don't know, if you're doing alternate days, then aren't you really teaching 90 days?
No, because every day has to count. So whatever you're doing on one day, you can't repeat that on the second day with the same kids. They have to be doing something different.
But as Tracy said, there are many lessons which can be synchronous. It's just, suppose there, I doubt if this would be the reality of, but suppose you're watching a film and the film can be 2 days long and the kids in the class are watching it and the kids at home are watching it, and then watching the first part. And then on the second day, it's flipped and the kids who are home watching it are now watching the second part at home. And, or there's a discussion going on that about a film or some event. And that can be synchronous with the kids in the class and the kids at home. Well, suppose we're talking about the election. There's no reason why that discussion can't happen on both sides, both in the A and B class at the same time.
Morgan, if I could ask you just for a moment to give your thoughts on this. So if you were going to be attending, let's say phys ed class was coming up in the next day, right? And so you're tuning in, and I tend to agree with you. I think synchronous instruction is certainly the best we can shoot for. It's what we would want as much as we can. But if you were in a phys ed class and you were at home and the class was learning a particular technique in some sport, right? Showing a strategy or technique. And then they moved to practice and they moved to a game, whatever it was during the experience. What would you as the student at home expect to be doing in that circumstance? Like, what would you see as like the best use of your time?
Well, like, as you explain that question, I'm a little confused as to what you mean. So you're asking me like, what they were asking? Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm saying that if you were at home and you were kind of observing the beginning of how to serve in volleyball, right? So they were showing a technique, the teacher was illustrating how to do that. And then the kids were moved to practice after that. Like they moved to practice it together. At that point, when the kids are practicing, I'm thinking like, what are you as a student at home doing at that point?
Well, honestly, I couldn't really see that being like too realistic, because like say it's like outside and it's raining and you can't go outside to like practice volleyball. I couldn't realistically see myself like playing a volleyball in my room or practicing that. And some people don't have the space to do that. So I really don't see that being practical as like an option for everyone.
Okay.
But again, Larry, like that, or Gary, that would be something like that would be every other day.
Mm-hmm.
Like that could be like phys ed might be one of the ones where the teacher has to do it every other day because it has to be hands-on.
Right.
But other classrooms don't have to have that.
Right. It's different from class to class. I agree.
Yes, and subject to subject, it's very, very different. And even, you know, when you talk about biology or any of the sciences where you might be doing labs, yes, you might have days where you have to do A is coming in and doing it, and then B is coming in and doing it at a different day. But they could watch if they wanted to watch, if there's something that they wanted to catch up on. And then there could also be something else that the teacher is giving them that's maybe a video that they watch is online while the other kids are performing their lab, you know, while they're actually physically doing their lab.
Right.
You know,
And
so
that would be
the
the
teacher could
asynchronous
use
part.
things, right? The teacher could use things to occupy the kids when the kids in the classroom would actually be doing hands-on thing. So gym, art, like band or anything like that, obviously, well, especially art and gym, you have to be there in person to do these things. So those definitely would be classes where you would have to do every other day types of things, and the teachers would be able to do that.
Right.
Hey, this is Zephy. Not to derail from this very important topic, but I have a slightly different question. And Gary, this might be more for Wade. And I know that, you know, you guys all feel very strongly about the every other day scheduling. So Wade, I would like to understand if I'm student that's cohort A and I get on the bus on cohort B because I'm confused, what happens when I get to school? How would I get back home? What would be the protocols for us to ensure the safety of that child if they attend on the wrong day?
Yeah, Zevi, it's a great question. I have started thinking about that. I don't have a full answer. I think we'd have to make some type of vehicles available, and I'm sure we would also employ what we do currently, which is call parents if there's a need. But if the parent wasn't able to, you know, say it's a situation where they don't have access to a vehicle or neither parent is available, then, you know, we would have to provide some type of a transportation back to home.
I could jump in here. I think it's these questions are very good, and I would throw this out there as one possibility we seriously considered is to scrap the hybrid and just have every 7 to 12 grade kids in 7 to 12 come to school every day, just like normal. And so I would say, why aren't we recommending that? And the answer is because that's so many students in the building at once with things like class changing and arrival, and it's just the need to have a hybrid at the older level is A, because there's so many students in the same building, and also that we were of the opinion that not only do they not need childcare, but they can do asynchronous things. If we are going to have a camera in the back of the classroom, say, then every lesson every day will be different. If we don't believe that asynchronous approach is valid. Now we believe it's valid from an instructional point of view, but if the board doesn't want to do that, okay, then we can put a laptop up in the back and kids could stay home and watch what happens that day. That is not going to be an interactive experience. That's essentially watching a video live. The teacher is not going to be able to stop what they're doing with a lesson, check in with all the kids who are at home, maybe dialed in, maybe not, answer questions there. It's just not going to happen that way. Now, it certainly could be the case, though, that the students would see what's happening and take in the lesson. The method of instruction during that lesson will be back several layers to the old days where we would lecture more and stay in one place more. And that's doable it's just not at all ideal, and certainly what we know now about learning preferences. So if we don't like any asynchronous expectations on the off days, and if we want to make it such that students can stay home yet still be part of the class, in other words, not do the virtual academy, then every day is a new lesson. And what actually takes place in a classroom will look significantly different than what we've been trained to do over the last 10, 20 years.
Jim, if I may, if we could circle back to really the overriding issue here. There's a couple things I think we're supposed to do tonight. Number one, vote on a plan to go back to school. And number two, help all of the parents who are watching, all the caregivers, try and come up with some way of deciding what they want to do with their student. And I'm sure, like everybody else, my head is spinning with all of this. So I'd like to maybe make a suggestion, because I think what we're sort of missing is the overriding elephant in the room. We haven't discussed it yet, and I think it's important. We have no idea how many of our teachers and staff are coming back to start the school year. This discussion is all well and good, assuming that we start the way we normally start. But there's nothing normal about what we are doing right now. And so we have to look at it a little bit differently. And the problem is, one, we have to vote tonight, and two, families have to decide very shortly what they want to do, not having any idea whether we're going to be equipped to open our doors to all of them at the end of August. I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because we have no idea what that's going to look like. If one teacher doesn't show up, I think we're going to make do pretty well. If a third of the teachers don't show up, we've got a problem. And I assume, because of social distancing and health and safety concerns, we can't operate like that. My guess is we'd be in a fully virtual scenario if that happened. So the key is, how do we give everybody an opportunity to vote as a board and to make a decision as a family as to what they want to do? Now, what we've been presented with are a couple of options. One is a hybrid option for the upper classes, a fully integrated option for the lower classes, and then this virtual academy, which admittedly, I don't think too many people know a whole lot about. I think that there is a concern of putting all of the K-5 kids back to school without limitation. That concerns me as a board member. It would concern me as a parent of a K-5 child if everybody's in. On the upper level, if you have a hybrid approach, I don't think it's optimal to say you're in every other day, and then when you're not there, you're learning on some model online. If you want that, we have a virtual academy. But there are some people who don't want that. There are people who would like the days that their children are not in class live, the opportunity to have some semblance of normalcy and or a live experience. When the idea was addressed last week of cameras in the classroom, maybe it's a misnomer, it should be a live experience, not necessarily a camera experience. We know it's not necessarily optimal. I heard the argument for and against it, but it gives the kids an opportunity to be in the now with their classmates, because all of the options that we've been presented with, none of them are what everybody wants. We're trying to make the best of a bad situation. And I think we have to look at the very real possibility that we could be completely virtual at some point. We've already discussed that it's reasonable to put an open laptop camera in the class. It's certainly feasible. And I would suggest that if we're not going to go completely 100% virtual, because I'm not sure that's reasonable, I'm not sure that's what everybody wants, but whether it's at the elementary school level, doing a hybrid approach like the upper school and letting kids tune in, or having the upper kids tune in as well when they're not there, and having every day just progress, and you're there every other day. There's a camera in the room with people who understand that they may not get the exact type of lesson they would envision, but we're not at that point in life now, are we? If they have an opportunity to at least be there, as opposed to being either in front of a virtual, alone program for an entire semester, I think we need to look at that, because remember, we have to make a decision, which we then have to live with until the next semester. And we don't know what's going to change from week to week. And if we're all being asked to make a decision that we can't change, as a board, you're asking us to send all of our kids through that door when we are going to be cleaning frequently or when feasible. But when we talk about things like, well, kids watching may not get the same experience of the volleyball lesson or of the lab in biology. If we go virtual, they're not getting that anyway. And the fact of the matter is, our teachers, we want as many there as possible on day one. And I think to make it as easy on them as possible to ensure we have the staff, shouldn't we give them an option to say, we're going to reduce the class size by letting kids go virtually if they choose by watching you. And that may make your life a little easier, number one, but it'll give everybody an opportunity to start this thing going forward if the worst case scenario happens. I think we have to look at it from that perspective. We are an institution of learning. We teach math, we teach science, we teach technology, and I don't think we're leaving it at the door because of the pandemic. So let's use that math, science, and technology. And instead of saying, this is going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, I'm not sure it's optimal, instead of saying, let's be reactive, let's be proactive. Let's be the institution of learning that says, instead of let's being the ones who follow the pack, let's lead the pack. Let's figure out how to do it the best way we can. And let's lead the charge because we're leading these kids into the schools. That's what I think is the best case scenario, because all of this is going round and round and round, and none of it is optimal. But let's do the best we can under the circumstances. And I think unless you're going to go fully virtual, give everybody an opportunity to have at least some semblance of that. People chose us to lead, and I think we need to lead. And I think it starts with that. That's my 2 cents on it.
I would say to Marshall. So my opinion for the elementary schools, I think we are giving that option of 100% in or 100% virtual, but being taught by Wissahickon teachers. So I think that we're kind of doing that for the elementary school right now. So if you don't want to send your kid in every day they're being taught by the Wissahickon teachers, right? Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So the problem then lies, in my opinion, with the hybrid choice and the virtual academy. And I personally don't have a problem with voting for a hybrid choice. I think we should vote for some kind of a hybrid choice for the secondary level. Again, my opinion is that the every other day is where I have a problem, and I know a lot of other parents have a problem with the, every other day being synchronous and asynchronous. We haven't heard from Alex yet, but we've heard from Morgan today and Paige and Olivia last week, where the students would like synchronous teaching, not every other day. So I think we're getting a lot of input that way. So I would love to see, like I said, I would have no problem voting for the option of having the hybrid and the virtual academy, as long as we put forth a better option during the hybrid of not having the every other day.
I'm comfortable with the plan, the way it's presented by Gary. It seems to me that that's probably the most efficient way to get all the students through the necessary content. They'll be staggered by a day or two, but everybody that needs hands-on in a class will get that. And the other lecture classes, I suppose, will still be staggered, but everyone will essentially be moving at the same pace and covering the same territory and not taking additional time, it seems, to cover the same content. My concern would be whether or not we will have additional resources available to students that are struggling with whatever model. If they have, I think you've mentioned before that the teachers will have office hours where students can call in or email in or whatever to get additional help as they need it. Are we making any accommodations for special ed students or with IEPs that might need more face-to-face contact? I'm going to stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, David, just with regard to special education, every one of those students' programs are individually considered. So if there's a student who's struggling and there's a need for additional support, Kelly Heim-McCloskey and her team will certainly be working with that family to provide the supports needed to be successful.
I think Alex is trying to talk, but we can't hear him.
Hey, Alex, yeah, I think your audio's off.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to add that if we're going with the hybrid model, I think using synchronous learning for the days that will be virtually, this will definitely like help students, I know, just engage first of all and better learn the material and subjects. Because I know that in the spring, learning asynchronous learning was a struggle for me because it just like making my priorities for mapping out what I'm going to do, when to do it. And I think that just having a class to follow throughout the day will just help me like exponentially with just following my class and prepare me for the next day when I'm going to school.
So there is an option that I am hearing where we continue to have half the students in every day. And then every day is just like a regular school day where the teacher is teaching the next lesson. And those students not that day have to get that lesson virtually. So that's possible. Then we can also, by the way, so you'd have like an A day cohort and a B day cohort. And from last meeting, we could theoretically have an X day cohort, which would be you never come in and you get your virtual schooling every day watching the classroom. That is technically possible, and we have the technology to do that. And I do appreciate Alex and Morgan's points about their perspective from the spring. We can do that without changing, and we get all the benefits of the hybrid piece in terms of the distancing, and then we add on the preferences for, I'm not going to use the word synchronous because it's really not, live viewing of the classroom. We just want to be sure everyone understands that what that is. It's just watching what others are doing in the classroom. And I'm willing to go with the students' thoughts and everyone else's thoughts about the efficacy of that. But maybe we try it for a semester and see if we can get some lessons learned. That might be a good idea too, in a sense. It won't need to change anything in the sense that if we, hybrid over the spring or the second semester, we could adjust it if we want. So maybe we try to see how that watching a class goes in terms of the instruction. So it won't be a repeat lesson. It won't be enhancing or enriching anything that was taught the day before. It's just the next lesson.
Right, and then the teachers.
Is there a reason why we can't do both? Is there a reason why we can't have the live broadcast, but also have the asynchronous support lesson or additional lesson that kids can also watch in their own time?
The answer, that's a good question. Paul answers it because teachers that can only be expected to prepare however many lessons they have for the classes. And that would be extra work. But they do
Well,
that now anyway. Like if you've mastered a content of something and you just want to go a little deeper, there are resources for that. And conversely, if you haven't quite mastered that concept yet, but the class is moving on, well, then there's ways to get help for that.
Well, the point that I'm making though is that if we're just videotaping or live streaming a live classroom, the teacher would have to prepare for that class regardless. So or if someone is choosing the option for the asynchronous learning, the teacher would have to prepare that content as well. So there's no additional content being prepared if we're live streaming in the classroom. Why not still offer both?
Well, if someone doesn't want to dial in at 8 a.m. And would prefer to watch it later, I suppose we could explore having it all of them taped and on Schoology, in a sense. That's a possibility.
Jim, I think in this
instance,
I think in this instance, Jim, I think what would happen is that the teaching and learning would follow just like a very similar program as in the regular school year. That the students would have, the lesson would be done, some kids would be present for it, some kids would not be. They would be tuning in and following along to the best of their ability for what's happening. And then following the class, there will be some kind of follow-up learning experience that forms in the form of homework or a follow-up project they're working on to kind of reinforce concepts being taught. So the asynchronous component of this really is embedded in the day of the learning plus the homework that follows and all of those pieces. And for students who need extra support or help, that would be afforded during office hours or as students would typically do that, math lab, writing lab, or extended learning time, all of which would still be available through this program.
That's great. That's what I was getting to.
And to go back to my previous comment, just to be clear, it wasn't that I was objecting to a hybrid methodology. I'm just more concerned about confusion and lack of continuity. I think it would be helpful if cohort A went Monday, Tuesday, cohort B went Thursday, Friday, and then there's a little bit of a kind of schedule in this time where we lack a lot of other schedules in our lives. So that was kind of the principle I was trying to get to, not opposing hybrid. I feel hybrid would actually decrease the number of people in the building, and I'm very much for that. If for those parents who want a hybrid option for their child, I'm just trying to find a schedule for students that would be easier for them to follow.
Okay.
So then I guess for tonight, what we're voting on is having the hybrid and the virtual, and those are the choices for the parents. And then maybe a little bit more of in the weeds of how the hybrid is exactly going to look. What days the kids will be going and that type of thing will come later.
Yeah, Tracy's right. I mean, the plan as is a it's a hybrid plan or a blended plan. That doesn't change. What we're, I think, debating and we're discussing is the specifics of how we deliver the hybrid instruction.
Isn't it this line here where alternate day at home is not, it will be changed from asynchronous lessons to live viewing of the classroom?
Well, when you say live viewing, like, you can do teams and kids that have questions at home can ask questions, just like they would be sitting at their desk.
Okay, well.
They could say, Mrs. Smith, I have a question, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yes.
Just like if they were sitting in the classroom and they said, Mrs. Smith, I have a question.
True. We are getting to Mrs. Smith needing to pay attention to some other things during the lesson.
If they're talking, she can hear them.
Yes.
It's not like they have to push the button to raise their hand. Like they would actually be participating in the class.
Okay, so then it's not just viewing, it's actually participating.
Participating, yes.
Okay.
So in that circumstance, would they be basically attending the class twice, once live in person and
no, we're
content online? That's what it sounds like.
No, because we're
No.
moving away from alternate day at home asynchronous, and now we're going to move to every day is a new lesson. And if you're live, you get the lesson live. If you're at home that day, you get the lesson watching and to some extent interacting.
Right, and then the teacher would have the ability to have certain days where if you're doing certain things like gym class or art class or labs, the teacher has the ability to say, okay, team group A, you're going to be doing the lab today, and group B, you'll do the lab tomorrow, and here's some other stuff that can be done.
Yeah.
It should be the exception of different things on different days, not the norm, but the norm should be, just like you would be in school, you're learning continuous every day.
Okay, so to Joe's point, I think we can, and I'm going to unshare this again. I think we can, the hybrid concept exists, the details. What we'll do is we'll doctor this document up and then share it out with student or the revised version for families in grades 7 to 12. We're not making any changes to K to 6. And then they'll have that information before they make the decision.
Right.
They'll have the information that Marshall wants about wisely about specific details of cleaning. Principals will provide that detail to them before the decision point. This will be fixed to reflect a different approach to hybrid, still hybrid. And they'll have that information before they make their decision as well.
Right, and they can do the little video and post those videos up so the parents can go on there and see what kind of safety cleaning they will be doing. And easy enough.
Video or other way of communicating the information. I'm not sure we're gonna get videos together that fast, but we'll make sure everyone knows exactly all their questions will be answered.
So just from a procedural point of view in our vote tonight, are we voting just on then the general framework of both separate votes, or do we have to say up or down regarding this particular vote in front of us tonight? Meaning,
Joe,
if we want some changes, do we have to vote it down in order for that to occur?
No.
I don't feel, I'm sorry, but I don't feel comfortable voting for this without it being complete.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that.
Say again, Zeffie, without what?
I feel like I need to see the revised document in order for me to vote on this. This is not, I'm not comfortable voting on this today.
Well, we can, let's see, I can doctor it up at the, I mean, it's, again, I don't know if this screen, I think it's really, it's this statement right here, alternate day at home asynchronous lessons. That statement's changing. And it's going to be alternate day at home viewing and interacting with the kids who are in school, just like you were there.
With all due respect, would you sign a document that hadn't had all the details as you needed it to be prior to signing it? I'm not comfortable with doing this.
No, I don't disagree with that, but we're not signing anything. It's
well, I'm not voting for it then.
It's okay. I mean, we could have I guess, a separate meeting. We could push the deadlines back. That would be preferable.
Well, we could take a vote and see what happens.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, if a majority vote no, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and have another meeting. If the majority vote yes, then we move on. So
could we approve the plan subject to rewording that? Am I correct? It's just rewording that one phrase?
And I think it was also the parts that Marshall had raised for the protocol for cleanliness.
Those parts won't be, those will not be in the plan. Those will be communicated directly to parents from the principals. Those are building specific things.
So that is not in the plan itself.
Right. Those need to be communicated for sure.
The only plan modifications, well, we could do two things to address these concerns. Number one, what is the wording change that you would make to the actual plan document, Jen?
Then it's simple, alternate day at home students will participate in class from home.
Okay, if we can approve the plan subject to that wording change and to direct the administration, in addition to the plan, to communicate the cleanliness standards that Marshall was articulating, would that make the board more comfortable in voting for the plan as presented? Recognizing that the plan itself is a fluid document, because we're going to probably be required beyond whatever we do in this approval to modify things as the state, the Department of Health, and the governor may require from time to time.
And the structure that on the wording is does not have detail. It just has the overall structure that the administration would communicate to the staff. So so it's not like there's a major difference that happens because of the phrase is going to change that we are asking Jim to change.
I'm just trying to address the palpable concern of what I am seeing from at least a few board members about voting on the plan without having anything addressed, at least as part of the motion addressing that. And I think it can be accomplished relatively easily without trying to structure yet another meeting
Right.
to further the angst over this issue.
So Joe just needs to say, you know, a motion with changes.
Yeah,
Or-
subject to these modifications.
Right,
To the modifications that were addressed.
right.
I still feel that we haven't really hashed out or completely understood how the synchronous learning is actually going to play out. And there's a lot of things that still have to be really assessed. And I'm not sure that they were fully vetted. And therefore, I still feel that it would be premature for me personally as one voting member to vote for tonight's item.
Okay.
I also have another question about the virtual option for the high school and middle school. If we're going to be having it where the hybrid model has the classes being live streamed on the alternate days, why can't we have our virtual students attending class with Wissahickon teachers every day then?
You can. If we change it the way we are talking about now, I would envision the Wissahickon Virtual Academy to be much less subscribed. And if you don't want to come home, like so I say, there'd be A day students, B day students, and then X day students. And the X day students never come to class. And so, yeah, I believe that this, if we change it like this, it'll substantially increase the interest in hybrid, because theoretically you could still stay away from school every day. And those who want to go to school for socializing or whatever would go every other day.
Or students in quarantine would take advantage of that.
And this takes care of the quarantining issue as well. That's right, Ron. Good point.
Okay.
I mean, we would still have the virtual academy option because some people like it. But this would provide, in a sense, an alternative to that.
All right, so are we going to vote on this with the stipulation that the change be made and the insertion of the X Academy also, or of the X choice?
Yes, well, when it comes time to vote on this, we will have those adjustments.
Was that a motion, Ron?
We're not there yet.
It's an agenda item later.
Right. But,
Can I ask
I think that's we're getting close to it, though.
we don't have to vote tonight, correct?
it's on our agenda to vote. If someone wants to make a motion to withdraw or table the vote, we can see if there's enough support for that.
I mean, it seems as though we've had awful lot of discussion and questions and comments. I don't know that we need another meeting to go over it again, but if we tailor it to what appears to be a consensus or seemingly, and then vote on it once we place the proper language in.
Well, the problem is that people need to make a decision by July 31st.
Well,
It's not July 20th.
And just to add to that, I think the district is faced with a lot of staffing concerns regarding the model. So if we delay by another 2 weeks the vote on the model, there are a lot of employees who are asking questions. The administrative team needs to populate and cover all of these eventualities. And the longer we delay in doing that, the more difficult that would be to accomplish. I don't always get a nod from Kathy Rossi, but she is nodding affirmatively right now. So
yeah, I think we should take an up or down vote tonight. And then based on that, we'll see what we need to do.
But I'm still not clear if we're voting up or down on it as is, or you're saying we're going to be revised. I mean, that's the problem. You're saying it's subject. If I vote yes with revisions, and then I don't like the revisions, are we then going to revote?
Okay, so here's the question. If we're voting for a hybrid option and a virtual academy option for secondary, right? This is where the issue is, not the elementary. Pretty much elementary we've cleared up. So it's a hybrid or a virtual, correct? We might not have all of the exact issues of what will happen in the virtual or the hybrid academy today, but we can vote to say that we want a hybrid option and a virtual option.
The virtual option, the Wissahickon Virtual Academy has been in place pre-pandemic. I mean, it's there. It's just always there.
Right.
What we've been debating and discussing is the specifics of how to execute the hybrid model, which would allow conceptually someone to choose hybrid, but never actually go to school.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, we're adding like another virtual option.
Right.
That's not the Wissahickon Virtual Academy. But in reality, it's like, so again, it's really just about some refinement of how the administration is going to execute the hybrid model. It doesn't change the virtual academy.
To address the specific concern of the board on the final wording. If the board is okay with this, it could be subject to we can modify the approval in the health and safety plan, subject to the wording modification that we talked about earlier, and further subject to the board president approving the wording of the modification. And the board president wouldn't do it until he would circulate it amongst the board and get consensus feedback that it would work, so that there isn't apparent license to have something that is inconsistent with a majority of what the board wants.
Wouldn't that violate sunshine law though, if we had that conversation behind the scenes?
I don't believe it would, is if you're giving that, and eventually that, I'm talking about wordsmithing. I'm not talking about debating the issue. We're talking about wordsmithing. And that wordsmithing would at least give some direction. And the board always at a future meeting has the prerogative to, if there's a majority of the board, to amend the plan to reflect what the board's intentions are.
I don't feel ready to vote. I feel like we are giving the high school teachers an impossible task. I don't understand how they're going to teach a class, address the kids in front of them, check to see if kids are asking questions online, messages on the screen. I'm not ready to.
Ronnie, they wouldn't have to check with the people online. They would be live. I have team meetings every day. We're having a Zoom right now where our whole group can have input. So if Jim is making a statement, we can say, I have a question, just like the kids in the classroom could do, whether they're sitting in their chair or sitting at home. It's not like the teacher is going to have to check emails or check to see if somebody raised their hand on the Teams. Will be voice activated, just like in a regular classroom.
I don't know.
How much notice would we need for a special meeting? Like if we could get the revisions together and then have a special meeting to actually do the vote?
24 hours.
Yeah.
24 hours in the newspaper.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think we have to remember that team meetings with adults are not the same as team meetings with kids. You're going to have kids yelling in, you're going to have kids trying to get attention in different ways. It's not the same. We're adults here on a team meeting.
Right.
And adults aren't going into their offices.
So, you know, I share the same concerns as Ronnie, that I know there's momentum building in this session as well as in the community about the idea of asynchronous look-ins with cameras and all that stuff. And again, it's technically feasible. I think that those days will be a poor substitute for what you would get if you were actually in class, and a worse option than a curriculum program that's designed to have asynchronous components at home. But again, that's my opinion, and I know we're allowed to have differences on the board. But Ronnie herself has been a teacher for what, 4 decades, and she has concerns about this approach. Gary and Jim have probably similar years of experience as educators, and they did not recommend or advocate this approach based on their professional judgment. So that's why I personally do not like the switch to the hybrid model that's been talked about. But I think at the end of the day, this is not about us convincing each other of who's right. I think at the end of the day, it's about taking a vote and seeing which is the majority opinion, so then we can move forward.
Yeah,
I need to clarify something I think is very, very important. When we speak of this new approach, the ABX approach of the hybrid that we've been talking through, a high school teacher, I'll take myself for example. When I was a high school teacher, I had 5 periods of about 25 kids. So I had 125 kids under my care. And I met with them every day, or, you know, depending on the schedule. But I graded 125 papers, and I created 5 lessons a day, and off I went. We are not going to have teachers have more than 125 students, or their normal number. Some teachers have more, like 130, some have 120, whatever. It's the same number of students per teacher. I don't want teachers to get the misimpression here that all of a sudden they're going to have their normal 125 coming in, half this day, half next, and then we're going to tack on another 70 or so of the kids who don't want to come in. That is not what we're doing. I just want to be clear about that. It will be just like the normal student load, and you just teach the lesson. Now it's going to be different, and I happen to agree with. I'm not convinced that it's going to be distracting and will take a hit on efficacy in terms of having to try to involve the students not there that day. It can be done, and it's not going to increase how many papers they grade. It's not going to increase how many lessons they prepare. It will be tricky though.
Well, I do think, Jim, it's important to state also that the students who will never be in the classroom, to assess their performance, will have to be different than what the other kids who are present in the class on occasion will be assessed differently. So we have to be attentive to that too. How students at home will demonstrate learning of the concepts they need to show across time if they are never in the classroom, is an issue, I think.
You know, as Jim was saying about marking the 150 papers, who's going to mark the compositions and the term papers and give the assistance to the kids who are writing those term papers in the X group?
The teacher, because those X group kids are part of that teacher's 125 kids.
Oh, I see. So even though normally they would have been in the A and B, but they just choose not to come at all.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Oh, okay. So that alleviates that problem.
Right.
Thank you very much.
The teacher total student load is not going to change. The composition of what it looks like is going to change, and that's no small feat. I think we've kind of touched on that. It's going to be extremely difficult to be a teacher in that environment.
Okay, well, I feel like we've talked this to death. Any final comments before we move on? Okay. Well, so thanks, Jim and Gary, for the information. So that's item 4 on our agenda. And next up, we're at the first public comment period of our meeting. So similar to last Monday's special meeting, which we had to discuss the school reopening plans, once again, we've received dozens and dozens of emails, a lot with just a series of questions about school reopening, which I will not be reading out loud tonight. I know folks are going to be excited about that. While parents deserve answers to those questions, our board meetings are not the best place for individual Q&A with parents. So those questions should be directed to the principal of your child's school. And in addition, since last week, the district's website under the fall reopening plan webpage has much more detailed information and FAQs about school reopening. So I'd encourage parents to look there as well. The original and primary intent of the first public comment period in our meetings is to give the public an opportunity to make a statement to the board on agenda items, especially if it may influence or inform our vote on those items. So with that being said, again, after filtering the questions or comments we received, that again were just questions, we have 7 statements from folks that were submitted on agenda items prior to the meeting. And as I read these, as I look these over, most of them are fairly short, so we won't have another 1 hour listening to comments like we did last Monday. Only one of them would push the 3-minute time limit, but I think, I think we'll be able to get through these real quickly. Again, we have 7 public comments submitted on the agenda items, all of them related to the school reopening plans. So I will read the first one, and it is from Christine De Laurentiis. And it reads as follows. I'm concerned as a parent and as a community member. The pandemic we are facing is unprecedented, and the statistics are trending negatively every day. The chances are extremely high that the governor will close schools again, possibly before they even open. And all students will end up at home with remote learning. Instead of moving back and forth between hybrid and virtual models, as schools may open and close repeatedly over the next few months, would it be better for all of our 7th through 12th graders to focus on one WSD solution that allows all of our students to learn remotely in an effective and well thought out way? Better to put all of our collective efforts in making that experience as close to in-person as possible, putting all of our energies into a robust program that works through the issues that we had in the spring and improves on the experience for everyone. At the secondary level, it makes sense to just keep everyone home and go 100% virtual, making planning and executing that well a priority. Otherwise, a lot of effort will go into the hybrid option, only to be scrapped once we all move back home and we are back to making do with last-minute remote learning. There are also a significant number of students, 7 through 12, that did not do well with asynchronous learning. That's last spring, and having a robust synchronous virtual experience will be key for them to be successful as we move through this school year. Since the elementary level will have robust options from the outset, both with WSD teachers and virtual synchronous planning, the switch between in-person and home is less problematic, and the plans for virtual will always be done and in place. We're just adding the rest of the student population once the schools will be forced to close and implementing the existing plans. Additionally, if we plan from the start to have secondary stay home with synchronous learning for the first half of the year, that should help with the staffing issues of teachers and staff that need to remain out of the building for safety concerns. It will provide remote opportunities at every grade level, making it easier to accommodate those that can't safely be in the buildings, reduce the viral exposure to teachers and staff so few substitutes will be needed, and eliminate the need for all secondary busing, freeing up the drivers, buses, and funding for additional social distancing space at the elementary level. There are many students that will not learn or thrive with either the in-person, hybrid, or virtual academy choices. They are not comfortable or cannot expose themselves to possibly becoming ill or carrying the virus home to loved ones, and they cannot learn with asynchronous learning platform. Neither option works for these students, and the district will be forcing a significant amount of them to cyber charter schools that can meet their educational needs, or Wissahickon has failed them, causing a large funding loss for the district. I implore you as a board as board members and administrators to keep our students, teachers, and staff members safe and meet the needs of all of the secondary students by planning for synchronous virtual learning for the first semester. The next statement is from Ann Giddies. I've just read our superintendent's most recent update, and I see WSD teachers are available to teach virtually for grades K through 6, but not 7 through 12. Those grades will utilize certified Montgomery County teachers. While I read all the reasons for this split in teachers, I still do not understand why the teachers cannot use technology, cameras in the room, Zoom, etc., to live stream classes to high school students on their at-home days, at their home hybrid days. It isn't double duty, it is just at home, students viewing them teaching the regularly scheduled classes in the physical building, which they're already doing. I feel strongly that I have sent my child to WSD for a strong education using WIS teachers, and it is unfair for half the grades to receive this and half not. Since the district plans to use WIS teachers for all grades if the governor closes schools, why would grades 7 through 12 be segregated out now when parents have to make a choice? In closing, you are asking me to choose between giving my child a great WIS education and putting her physical health at risk, or giving her, in my opinion, a lesser education and keeping her physically safe. That is not a comfortable choice. The next statement is from Jennifer Stomsky. While I understand your rationale for not having WSD teachers teach synchronous classes to 7 through 12 students who decide to do virtual, I feel like it is punishing those students for not manning up and going back to school. Why does there have to be a virtual or in-person hybrid option at this time? As safe as you claim to make it, it is not safe. The teachers and students in this district are fully equipped to do synchronous virtual lessons at all levels. Colleges can do it, it is not hard. Students get their schedules, they log into a class rather than walk into it. At the end of the class, they log out. There is a 5 to 10 minute break to stretch legs, get a drink, use the bathroom, and then they log back into the next class. Everyone is getting an equal education and no one is risking their lives. This is what Wissahickon should have been planning for since the end of this last school year. Are we supposed to be a top school in the state? Why were we not thinking along those lines? And while I do not know all the financial ins and outs of running a school district, I would think it makes financial sense since the overhead costs of not using the buildings or limited use of them and the buses would not be the same. You would not have the additional costs of extra bus routes, extra drivers, and all the supplies the school will need. Even if you return for the second half of the year, those costs could be halved by being virtual for the first. Finally, we spend a lot of time defending that teachers are not glorified babysitters, but that is exactly how they are being treated right now. They are humans with their own lives and families, and I do not think they are being seriously considered in this discussion. Because while the students get a hybrid choice, the teachers do not. The risk we are weighing extend beyond our district's borders. There does not have to be safety plan. There does not have to be safety plans. We know exactly how we can plan this safely. And right now, safety should be the priority. No student will be left behind because we will all be in the same boat, but I would rather spend my time working with my child to get them through school or get them caught up than planning their funeral. No risk is a worthy risk. Next is from Tom Scott. Data continues to show that both children and adults are at risk to contract and spread COVID-19. At last week's meeting, board member Amy Ginsberg and District Attorney Jeff Sultanic displayed a total disregard for teachers and their health when discussing the district's liability when, not if, teachers become infected with COVID-19 during in-person instruction. Will the board continue to demonstrate a total disregard for the health and welfare of teachers and their families, not just those with exceptional cases presented to HR? Next is from Robin Klempner. Hello, many other districts are offering a synchronous learning plan for both virtual and hybrid options. Why is this not an option for our district? I know this is being offered virtually for K through 6th, but not for hybrid and not at all for 7th through 12th. My 10th grader is very scared that he will fail 10th grade without synchronous learning. How is this okay? My 6th grader wants to do hybrid, but then loses the option to have synchronous on her off days. My kids and I are very worried about their learning experience this year. Please make synchronous learning an option for all grades, virtual and hybrid, for the sake of our children's education. The next is from Pat Crowther. Why, as parents, are we not given the choice of our
Joe.
children? Yes?
Was that 5 already?
Yep, we have 2 more. We're in the home stretch.
I thought we were only doing 5.
We were limiting 5 for on a given topic.
Yes. So are these different topics?
These look like they're all school reopening.
So I think we're done with them then.
Okay, I will defer to my vice president who says we're limiting it to 5. The other 2 were similar comments about and different perspectives on school reopening. I think the sentiments that are being expressed were were similar to a lot of the board member questions and discussions that we had earlier today. And again, expressing some members of the community's perspectives on what should influence our vote a little bit later this evening. Okay, and with that, we are moving on then to the board president report. I have no informational items or action items to speak of. So we're going to move on then to the superintendent report, and that's back to Jim.
Okay. I see everybody tonight. Thank you for having me. I have no informational items. I am informationed out, I imagine, and have bored people to tears, but we do have 3 important action items. The first is the athletic department health and safety plan for phase 1. And I think we talked about that last meeting, but that covers July 1 through August 9, I think it is. So it's already in place. That's a ratification. The second is the health and safety plan that we submit to PDE. That was the first document we reviewed tonight. And the third is the fall reopening teaching and learning plan that will undergo the changes that we discussed in terms of what happens when students are at home. So in order to kick off the discussion, I would request, please, approval of action items 7B1 through 7B3.
Jim, can I request, just because I believe there's some differences of opinion on this, should we take this as a separate roll call vote?
Certainly. Sure, yeah, sure. That
Can
makes
I
sense.
ask you a question? Do we need to pull out just number 3, or do we have to pull out number 2 and number 3?
Well, maybe there's only 3. Maybe we just vote on one at a time, just in case anyone has a concern or something. All right, so then let's start with a motion, please, to approve agenda item 7B1.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments or discussion? Okay. So I'm going to take a roll call vote on this. Wade or Katie, who can conduct a roll call vote?
For this one?
Do you want to just do a voice vote? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's already in place. So
All right.
we're not changing anything.
Okay, then with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. So that's the health and safety, wait, that's our
What is the
athletic department.
athletic one?
This is our athletics health and safety.
That's ratification, so thank you.
Right.
Secondly, I'd like a motion, please, to approve agenda item 7B2.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. Again, this is for the health and safety plan, the document that we'll be submitting to the Pennsylvania Department of Ed. Any additional comments? Okay, who's conducting the roll call vote? Is it Katie or Wade?
You can do it.
80.
Okay, Katie, please.
Mr. Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Bleefeld,
No.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
No.
Mrs. Heyman,
No.
Mrs. Karianakis,
No.
Mr. Stoloff,
Yes.
Mrs. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Antonio,
Yes. Katie, what's the count on the vote?
4 yes and 5 no. Hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, 5 yes, 4 no.
Okay, the motion passes and it's approved.
Okay, and lastly, a motion please to approve agenda item 7B3 as amended.
The amendment being a refinement of elimination of the asynchronous learning for hybrid, replacing language, talking about synchronous participation from students at home. Is that fair? Okay, can I have a motion?
Can you restate the motion, please, Joe?
So that would be a motion for approval of item 7B3, which is the fall reopening teaching and learning plan for document 7.3, amending this statement in the hybrid learning for 7 through 12 to eliminate the asynchronous learning days and replace it with some language that references synchronous participation in classes on days when you're not in school.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any additional comments? Yeah, okay. I guess we'll take a roll call vote on this as well.
Okay. Mr. Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Bleefeld,
No.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
No.
Mrs. Heyman,
No.
Mrs. Karyonikis,
No.
Mr. Stoloff,
Yes.
Mrs. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Antonio,
No.
Four yes and 5 no.
Okay, the motion fails. So Jim, then we will have to talk later about what comes next.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the assistant superintendent report. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Antonio. There are no informational items this evening and no action items under the assistant superintendent's report.
Okay, the board solicitor report. Jeff?
No report.
Okay, the board secretary report. Wade?
No report.
And then the board treasurer report.
No report as well. Thank you.
Okay, personnel director report. Kathy?
Yes, thank you, Joe. Requesting approval of action items 12B1 through 5, which include items on document 12.1, where number 2 is increasing the substitute bus driver rate from $20 an hour to $26. Approval of a substitute lunch assistant rate being increased from $10 to $15. Approval of the grievance settlement between WEA and the Wissahickon School District and Employee A, pending receipt of the signed document. And then approval of the substitute professional rates increased as stated below on that item.
So moved.
Ron, is that a second?
Second.
Okay. The motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? Kathy, I just wanted to ask the increases in rates, are those because we anticipate that it'll be more difficult to secure subs?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Communications committee report. Zeffie?
Aye.
Sorry, Zeffie, what was that?
Steffi, I think you're muted.
I'm having technical difficulties. I voted yes.
Oh, right. So yeah, and we're at the communications committee report. Anything?
I'm having a major delay. I apologize for that. There's no informational or action items for this meeting.
Okay. The Curriculum and Technology Committee report, Ron? Ron?
Hey, Ron?
Is it Ronnie?
Oh, sorry, Ronnie, sorry.
Okay, I have nothing to report.
We do have some items that looks like up for vote.
Yes, we have two action items for this evening. The first is a purchase of technology equipment to support distance learning, pending adequate inventory and pricing. Basically, what we're doing is for the increased fleet of Dell Chromebooks that we've ordered and additional elementary computers, we're ordering additional carts to support them, to charge them, and to keep them secure. We're also ordering reasonably priced tablets with stylus so the teachers will have access to them and use them for synchronous learning for students to observe what's being written on the board. And additionally, we're paying for a firewall that will enable the Dell Chromebooks to be properly synced with our system and properly secured from a filtering perspective. And the second item is the purchase of new IEP software for the drafting of IEP documents and related documents for our student services team. When we moved to Infinite Campus, we transitioned to their special ed IEP writing documents. Not very well developed at this point, and we needed a better tool to meet the standards that we usually have for our documents and documentation. So we're moving to IEP Writer at a cost of $20,722. Which we intend to implement as soon as we can in the early fall for all documents and student services. So I'm asking for a motion to approve action items 14B, 1, and 2.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
I know we've moved to Infinite Campus and we've had some issues with it. Are we looking at the point, is this working out with Infinite Campus? Or are we looking to having to switch this in the near future? Or is it just a couple of little glitches with it that we're talking?
We have had glitches. We knew from the start, Tracy, that the special ed module that's in Infinite Campus was not a very Pennsylvania specific module. So it was more national. And so there are things legally that we like in our IEPs or need to have in the IEPs, and those things have not been there. And we've also not been able to copy tables and charts and things into the Infinite Campus module that we typically do for our testing for special ed students. So we're switching to this. We think it'll be a much more seamless and more efficient use of our professionals' time. And additionally, should we find that Infinite Campus evolves theirs into a more sophisticated system matching Pennsylvania, which they are working on, but we know it's not anytime soon, and we really feel as though we're compromising our standard in the product for this area in particular. But overall, I think we're smoothing out some of our rough spots. It has been a rough go for year one, but we're hoping as we move into year two, many of the things have been worked out and will become more seamless. We also see benefits that the Infinite Campus is providing us, including online registration opportunities now, which is also improving, especially during the pandemic.
Okay, can we just keep an eye on that and just make sure that moving forward, it is working out for us?
We are. Thank you, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. The Facilities and Transportation Committee report, Tracy.
Yes, there's no informational items. There are a few voting items. So Wade, do you want to take that over?
Yep, thank you very much. Very, very positive bid results. When you add these 4 motions into the original budget, we will be approximately $400,000 under the budget that the board had last seen. And that includes at this point an almost $900,000 contingency, which at this point is a very, very healthy contingency. And I suspect unless we really run into a lot of problems, we will not be going anywhere near that. So The first item is the acceptance of the bids. The second item is various professional services for testing of earth, borings, concretes, and those types of things. The second part of the second motion is for HVAC and balancing testing. The third is an approval for fee amendments for the Dewey Engineering project, the consultation services, based on the fact that the total amount of months of the project is going to be extended. And based on that, there's additional fees and oversight. And then the last one is additional fees. It's for Breslin, but it's basically a pass-through for civil engineering additional services that were required. But again, the positive is that if you add those 4 items up, we're $400,000 under budget. We should be on time with good contractors, and we appreciate the board's support. The one thing I did want to note, Joe went through the comments. There was one comment from the public that had requested that we hold on this based on the uncertainties. So I just wanted to make sure that that was presented. I did see that one public comment. But again, I am very, very positive on the bid results and where we are. And I'd like to thank the professionals that have brought us forward to this point.
Wade, I did have a question on the additional fees because the project was extended. Is there any money from the government on items like this because of COVID and everything being shut down? How now we have an extra fee for?
Yeah, it's possible, but I think it's more probable that we'll probably put that money to better direct instructional use, like technology and other things that are probably going to get into the classroom. This related to, frankly, it's the last piece of work, which is the conversion of the cafeteria to the library. So, you know, yes, it does seem like that it was a little bit delayed and some extra costs because of COVID, but I think it would be more direct to just put it to the instructional purposes.
No, I was just talking about applying to the government to get reimbursement for something like this.
I'm not sure that there is anything that we would be able to get reimbursement for extra costs related to COVID. I'm not sure if we can, but I can certainly look into it.
Okay.
Wade, one of the things we had discussed last year was outreach and effort to get diversity amongst some of the contractors once the bidding period started. Have we started that effort yet? And can you give us an update on where that is if we have?
Sure. So I did send a note to the board telling you at a point in time where we were. I had sent 2 letters to an entity to try to obtain contracts that were MBA related and encouraged the contractors to use those contractors. I did not receive replies. Included in the notes that I sent to the board, I also noted that Dewey is an MBE, and that is the participation thus far that's going to be directly related to this project.
Will there be ongoing efforts from this point forward? Is there a plan in place for that?
Paul, Mr. Badger, I'm very, very open to that concept, and I'm sort of running into a wall on it. So, you know, if there's other projects that we do, whether it's flooring or painting or whatever, I am happy to, you know, encourage whatever participation we can on those projects.
Great. I do have some resources in that regard that I can forward if that would be helpful.
Sure.
For consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Wade, do you want to ask for a motion?
Sure. I would request approval of action items 50B 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
quick thank you very much to the board. I see Robin has popped in and Arif as well. Thank you very much to the professionals who have brought this, on time, under budget to this point, and we look forward to a wonderful project. I'm sure it'll be some bumps in the road, but thank you very much thus far for all your extra efforts, and Jerry as well.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee report, David?
Thank you, Joe. We don't have any informational items tonight. We do have one action item, which is to approve, we're requesting approval of a ratification of the purchase of individual student desks for a total not to exceed $42,250, which will be going into various buildings to help meet the requirements and the seating that we'll need to maximize social distancing so that all students are safe when we do return to school. Is that correct, Wade?
Yes.
So we need a motion to approve that, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments?
Can I have a question on
Yeah,
that?
Ron.
Yeah, what do these desks look like? Are they like the old armchairs that we all knew and loved when we were in school, or are they just individual floating chairs?
They're actually just the floating desks. We had chairs, but several of the buildings were made up of double desks together, and we couldn't do spacing. So we had to buy just the desk. We already had the chair, so it's just desks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, Policy Committee report, Marshall?
Thank you. We have no informational items tonight. We do have quite a bit of action items. There are 25 of them. We've gone over these a couple of times. These range in policies from authority and powers to board functions, meetings, and then areas such as discipline, policies regarding tobacco, vaping, and then having to do with students and faculty and staff, and drug testing. And as I said, we've gone over that a couple of times. So I believe we're up for a vote tonight. Is that correct, Jim?
Yep.
Okay. So we didn't have any comments the last couple of times. We've read it. So I would ask for a vote.
Okay, we're looking for a motion to approve action item 17B1 through 25.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. We're moving on now then to the report of board representatives. Tracy, was there a meeting of the extracurricular committee?
No meeting.
Okay, the MCIU Board of Directors, we met on June 24th, and we had a presentation on the IU's school safety and security reports. We approved school district reps to the IU board, appointed board officers, honored retirees, and reviewed and approved budgets, contracts, and other administrative items. Fairly routine, other than the retiree honoring. The next MCIU board meeting is on August 26th. The next one is the MCIU Legislative Committee. Ron?
And there was no meeting this month, and we'll probably not meet until August.
Okay.
I don't have the date yet.
North Monco Technical Career Center, Ronnie or David, anything to report?
Not really. School is proposed to open like we will, but they're holding off in some of the activities that students do there have to be in person. So they're waiting to see.
Okay. So that takes us then to the second public comment period, where we hear comments on any school-related topics. There were several that were submitted prior to the meeting at the email address, and I think Katie did a few more. I think a few more came in during the course of the meeting itself. Again, any comments that came came in that were primarily questions, especially about school reopening. Those are not going to be reviewed out loud. Again, there's a better avenue through the building principals or the district's website on school reopening to get those questions answered. But of the ones that were submitted, and again, limiting to no more than 5 speakers on a given topic, there were definitely several. And let's see. Thank you, Katie, for consolidating these. And we have a total of 5 comments to read, all, I believe, on the same topic. It is in reference to a community event that was sponsored and organized by Wissahickon students, recent alums, around anti-racism within the Wissahickon School District. I'm going to pull up this document and read through these. Comment number 1 is from Jantika Kapoor, and it reads, following the student-run community conversation on July 12th, there has been absolutely no district acknowledgement of the experiences with racism and discrimination that many students like myself have endured. The Board of Directors and Wissahickon administration should have not only released a public statement acknowledging this event, but must also realize the urgency of this situation. I have personally contacted the board over 1 week ago in hopes of setting up a board meeting focused on the implementation of the demands, but have yet to hear back from a single board member. While I understand the reopening of schools also commands the board's attention, we must understand that the safety and well-being of Wissahickon students of color cannot be swept under the rug any longer. The next comment is from Johanna Bauer. I would like to express my support for the event that took place on July 12th and my disappointment in the administration for not showing up and supporting it nearly as much as the community. This event clearly drew many students to share their heartbreaking stories of their struggles at Wissahickon, and the lack of support and acknowledgement from the administration reveals their priorities. I hope that they can make up for this and acknowledge the issues that happen right in front of them every day. The next statement is from Courtney Burke. It is saddening that there has been no acknowledgement from the district of the anti-racism reform community event that took place on July 12th. Why have you not addressed the event that took place in Penland Park on the 12th? The next statement is from Anissa Wormers. On June 12th, there was a community discussion and event that not only exposed the racism and discrimination evident at Wissahickon School District, but also came up with proactive steps to fight against this issue. With the efforts and voices of many students, particularly the students of color, this event was made possible. It was a chance to educate, listen, excuse me, and start to do better with addressing this issue inside the schools. As an alum from the school district, I found it appalling that teachers and administrators turned a blind eye to this event and ignored discussing these issues afterwards. What's even more disturbing is the fact that the school board has continued to ignore this issue altogether, even when it is brought up by student representatives. Because of the lack of discussions from the administration and the ignorance that is still present in many of the staff and students, I believe it is of the utmost importance to begin to take accountability and start to make steps to ensure equity in the classroom for the underrepresented students. How have you been actively engaging in racial discussions, if at all, and how do you intend to help with this issue in all the schools? I understand that the reopening of this district is important, but ensuring safety for the students of color at Wissahickon is something that has been ignored for far too long. And the final statement is from Leanne Shen. How does the board plan to do a better job of listening to students of color? There has been barely any district acknowledgement of the event that occurred on July 12th. Students relive their pain in hopes that the board would do something to make sure no student ever goes through this again. But it seems these students' experiences have fallen on deaf ears. I understand the amount of planning that goes into reopening school, but it is a shame to see almost nobody at least acknowledge what happened. Administration being unresponsive to the struggles of students of color is a pattern I saw during my time at Wissahickon, and I'm extremely disappointed to see this pattern has continued, especially at a time where it is so crucial to support Black students. And that is the final comment.
Joe,
Yes.
the first statement, who was that from? Because I don't know that I received an email. I just want to check that name.
Jantika Kapoor. She emailed.
The first one. Wasn't there another
Yeah, that
one?
was the first statement was from her. Yes. She did send an email to all of us board members in advance of the event. Yes.
Right. I thought that there was another, somebody else said, I thought it was a that said that no one responded to them.
First one was from Jantika Kapoor. Second one was from Johanna Bauer. And then third was Courtney Burke. The next was Anissa Wormers. And the last one was from Leanne Shen.
Well, yeah, I'll have to take a look at that because I thought that I replied to everyone that emailed us. And I did want to say, I believe we did touch on this very briefly at our last meeting. And I believe that we did say that we are going to go much deeper in depth in our August meeting. But know that we are, this has not gone away for us, no matter what we're doing right now with the reopening of schools. This is high on all of our radar as a school board, and this will be discussed more in depth at the August meeting.
Yeah, and to that point, I responded to Jantika's email prior to the event, and I know that at least a few of other board members did as well. I was at the event in person, and I got a chance to talk to Jantika before and after the event as well. I thought it was a very powerful event, hearing the voices and experiences of students directly. And it is an issue that I think is very important, and one that I would like to see us as a board, and certainly the district administration, to take more active steps to try to address. We did touch on it briefly at the last school opening meeting last week. It was brought up by our student board reps, who, again, it's a very important topic for them as well. And we did make a commitment, and I've spoken to Jim separately, as well as Tracy has as well, about making this a formal agenda topic at an upcoming board meeting, likely in August. I would also like to see if we could invite, especially the student organizers, Jantika and Leanne, to come and speak with us as a board at one of those upcoming meetings.
I think that's a very good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously school reopening is a hot topic and one that's taking people's attention, and rightly so. But I know I don't want us as a board, and certainly the administration, to lose sight of this issue, which has been a long-standing issue in the district, and one I think is sort of ripe for change and action. Yeah, as we go into the school year. So
I agree 100%, Joe and Tracy, with those comments. I did respond to the email that was sent, but I'll just briefly restate again what I wrote in that email. I did have a chance to participate via Zoom. I wasn't able to be there in person, but as were other board members also on the Zoom call as well. But I just want to commend the students and all of the speakers, everyone who had the courage to get up and to speak on their truths and their experiences. As a former Wissahickon student, an alum, and an African-American, I understand their concerns. I understand their experiences. As I wrote in that email, they are unfortunately not new. And they have been in existence far before I attended Wissahickon, unfortunately. But I'm encouraged that that the students, as well as the administration and the board, are paying attention to the issue, and that we are going to be proactive moving forward. As was stated, there are a lot of major issues on our plate right now that are literally burning fires that have to be put out in addition to that. But that is a very high priority as well, and should get the focus and attention that it deserves. I'm glad that the board and the administration are taking proactive efforts to do that.
So we are at the board comment section of our agenda, and any other comments from board members?
I wanted to make one comment. I wanted to thank Alex and Morgan for spending 3 hours of their summer night here on our board meeting with us. It's appreciated, and you guys going above and beyond. So thank you very much for being here tonight and participating.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to add that as a student, I really appreciate what everyone on the board's doing through these difficult decisions, and it really just shows how much hard work is going in to make sure we have our best education possible. So thank you.
Right. I also wanted to add that racism is a very big issue. I experienced it so much, and especially when it almost affected my education because I've been called the N-word, I don't even know how many times. So, and it's such a big issue, and it hurts me to see how like they're really, I've never felt like honestly comfortable at school. I feel like I'm not treated like equally. I'm not treated the same because I honestly, I feel like I might be called the N-word maybe every other day, or I hear that word every other day, every day maybe, and it's not good. It's horrible. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, so sorry to hear that, Morgan.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Hard to follow that statement, Morgan, because it's something that we really have to do something about. And that's, one of the comment I wanted to make originally before your statement was I attended another Zoom conference today on school opening times. Believe it or not, the issue has not died. And actually, more schools are going to be opening later, obviously not this year, but next year. And one of the things that was noted is that students who were home during the quarantine, their parents noted that their spirits were better. They were less grumpy and less irritable because they were getting more sleep. And that's the goal of the whole project. And so it's something to consider. And obviously, this is something will have to be pushed way back. And as far as the survey that we were planning to do in the fall, or rather in the spring, they don't recommend that we try that until we have some sense of normality, if and when we ever do.
Okay. Yeah, Amy?
Yes, I know we don't typically respond to public comment, but I just did want to respond briefly to the one public comment and just say I apologize if my comments last week were misunderstood in any way. However, the intent of my comments was to express concern for our teachers, a concern for them returning to school.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, it's, yeah, go ahead.
So we've left this off of, we're going to figure it out and set up a new date for another meeting.
Well, I think with the failure of the passage of this more specific fall reopening options, we obviously have to, I would suggest that Jim makes an adjustment to that specific area that we had discussed. And I guess we need to circulate it amongst the board and try to schedule a meeting sooner rather than later to have a formal vote on a revised version of that plan.
Okay, well, actually, it's not clear to me what revisions I need to make. I'm not sure what would, I could use some direction as to what the board would like so that I can put something in there that will pass.
Do we set that up as an executive session?
No, I mean,
I don't think that's a topic that is eligible for executive session.
So how do we without going into a fourth hour here? How do we get together, brainstorm, and put something together so we can get to vote quickly?
You want to set up a subcommittee for the wording?
I think we need speed versus more committees. I would suggest that we schedule a special meeting. We need some advance notice provision to like advertise it. So I think the earliest we could reasonably schedule another meeting would be Wednesday, and Wednesday evening. And I think worst case, we use that as a session to debate revisions to that plan and then vote on something that night.
Does that give the administration time to reformulate the plan? No, they put a lot of effort into.
Well, how about, would it work if we individually emailed Jim what our objections to the plan was.
Okay.
And then if it's not something that he can come up with an actual revised plan from, because it might just be one thing on there that had someone voting against it. And maybe put something together like that.
I think it would be more productive if we were able to get together and talk things through. I don't think shooting emails to Jim is going to solve anything.
Right, but Zeffie had stated that she's not comfortable with voting on something that's not like clear and concise on paper, unless I misunderstood what she said. So if we don't have it clear and concise.
I think that was the whole, I thought that was the whole point. I mean, it's no secret. I voted it down because the way it's written, I wasn't certain that we were going to get it the way we wanted to be necessarily to try and put it to a positive vote. So I think it should, at the very least, be amended, updated, whatever it may be, based on the ideas that we had to reflect what it is we'd like to see, so that when we vote on it, I don't know that we need another several hours of debate on this. I think we debated it. We just need to put it on paper so that everybody's comfortable. We vote on it, and parents are then able to, parents, grandparents, caregivers are able to vote on how they want the kids to show up.
That's what I'm saying. I think if each one of us was to send to Jim what part of it we would like to see changed, it might be that everyone is talking about the same exact thing. And Jim could make the change then, and then we could come and either vote on it or have a little bit of discussion if that's not exactly what it needs to be.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So
that way Jim has a little bit of an idea of what he needs to look at.
So board members, email Jim what you would like to see or what changes you'd like to see in order to vote it yes. Jim, based on that, you're probably going to get conflicting information, but I think we want to get a version of that plan that will have at least 5 people voting yes, that you can draft. We'll schedule a public meeting for Wednesday evening. Again, we have that 24-hour notice period. We need to get it publicly advertised. And then we will see the draft version that Jim comes up with between now and then, and we can edit it on the fly to get it to a position where at least 5 board members are comfortable approving it. Is that fair?
Or if it's, if there's one statement that's polar opposite and, 5 people are emailing about this and 4 people are emailing about that, maybe you just write up 2, 1 with each option, and we vote on that way and figure it out which one needs to go through.
Yeah. Okay.
To be clear, right now, this is as clear as mud to me. I hope that your email will help me. I actually have no idea what I'm supposed to prepare for Wednesday night, but I'll read emails and figure it out, I guess.
Okay.
Okay.
If I may, somebody's going to need to get an advertisement in, I think, first thing in the morning to be sure that we can make Wednesday. Otherwise, we will not make Wednesday.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, well, yeah, so then it's Wednesday or Thursday. I mean, again, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
Well, Wade said he could do it.
Yeah, so Jeff, I won't be able to get it into the paper tomorrow, even if I do it first thing, but I can get it into the paper for Wednesday. Will Wednesday advertisement count for a Wednesday meeting?
No.
Okay, then you're looking at Thursday.
That's why I try to say something, yes.
I will inform the board if there's any chance of getting it into the paper tomorrow, but I don't think there is, even if I do it at 7 a.m. in the morning. So
one option we have to save the advertisement is that we don't recess, we don't adjourn today's meeting, and we continue the meeting until Wednesday.
We could do that.
Save the cost of the advertisement. So we can not adjourn tonight and continue the meeting to Wednesday or
That's a very good idea.
Assuming Jim will be ready with what he currently is not sure what he's going to put together for Wednesday.
Jim will be ready with what he's not sure about, but Thursday doesn't work for Jim, so let's do Wednesday.
Okay, so we don't adjourn.
Does that mean we have to leave our computers on for 2 days?
Jeff, you'll inform me if I need to do anything. Otherwise, I'm good.
Just the only issue is that we probably should post on our buildings the existence of this, and we probably should place on our website some kind of just brief notification that our meeting's being continued in the sake of transparency for Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we need to make a motion to continue the meeting?
Pardon me?
Do we
I
need to
know-
make a motion to continue the meeting to Wednesday?
The motion
Just recess?
the motion to recess, I'm sorry, the motion to recess would indicate that this meeting will be recessed until a meeting will be scheduled on Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Make that
whoever
motion.
makes the motion and the second at the end of this meeting. I'm not available, but I'm not so sure I can solve your problem anymore.
Right. Okay,
So
so we're not,
I'd like to make a motion to recess the meeting to Wednesday at 7.
So moved.
Second.
A second.
all right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is recessed until Wednesday. Thanks everyone for sticking it out through the end. It's a long meeting, but I think an important one. And I'll see you guys in a couple days.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Well, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Stay safe.